We now come to the backbench debate on International Women's Day. Dawn Bartlett.
Thank you. I beg to move that this House is considered International Women's Day. Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting this debate today, and also to bring the House's attention to my register of interests. I am an ambassador for Ask Angela, a very good scheme where if you're feeling unsafe in a club, you can go to the bar and talk to somebody and they will help you in any way they can. I'm also an ambassador for Fair Pay, the Global Fair Pay Charter, which aims to improve the living conditions and pay for over 25 million tea plantation workers worldwide, many of them women. And as we know, financial independence is a route out of an abusive relationship. And I'd like to congratulate this Parliament, and it is the most diverse Parliament with 41% female. We all know our number, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was number 286th woman to be elected to this House, and the first black female elected minister in the UK under Gordon Brown's government. And as Shadow Minister, I was instrumental in getting the flag flown, the International Women's Day flag flown over the House, and also the first debate that we had on the floor of this House. And I remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, speaking to the Speaker at the time and asking if the member for Birmingham and Yardley, who's now the Minister, could read out the names of the women who had been killed by men to start the debate without a speech. And I think it took about 7 or 8 minutes. And the thing is, 10 years later, that list is still as long. It still takes that amount of time. And you think, how can that be so? How can it be so that a woman is still killed every 3 days? And there's still the women by a partner or former partner, and there's still women that are not counted, like women who commit suicide because of domestic abuse, and trans women and girls. And I've been thinking about this a lot, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I've been told that heterosexual straight white men and boys are feeling that there's no place for them anymore in society, and that is why they are turning to the far right. And that really saddens me, because there is a place for everyone in society. And of course, there's a place for straight white men and boys, and a very important role for them to play in society. And we will hear a lot today the fact that one woman is killed every 3 days, and 97% of them are killed by men, the majority of them white. So if we want to protect women, we need to reach out to those men, the ones are informed, the ones that are kind, the ones that are loving. And we need to say that we need you now more than ever before. Because right now there are some serious, toxic, misogynistic men, and some of them straight, and they are harming women, they are harming society, they are harming gay people, they are harming black people, and this is the very foundation of which we live. And we need to say no. I'm happy to give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. In the UK, a woman is murdered by a current or former partner every week. Research from Women's Aid shows that 46% of women have faced some form of abuse in an intimate relationship during their lifetime. Given these harrowing statistics, we must confront domestic abuse for what it truly is, a national emergency. Does she agree that life-saving specialist domestic abuse services, which have been chronically underfunded, must receive the investment that they so desperately need?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and he hits a very important point. Absolutely, we need that investment. If we're serious about saving lives, we need to do what it takes to do that. If we want to see a reduction in the number of women who are killed, we need to invest in making that happen. We also need to have the uncomfortable conversations. It's not tough to hit women, as like Andrew Tate spouts out, or rape women or ridicule women, girls, because basically they've said no. And we've got to have those conversations, and we've got to say, look, this is wrong. And we've got to say to like all the men that are feeling like, you know, I'm wearing a male shirt and tie today. It doesn't mean that the world's going to run out of male shirts and ties. You know, there's enough to go around for everybody. And we've got to have that conversation, and we've got to show men loving women. We have to show that. We have to educate. We have to educate boys and girls. And what's really interesting is that there are some fathers who treat their daughters like princesses, and they think that that's how their daughter is going to learn how to be treated, when the reality is the daughter will learn how to be treated by how the dad treats the partner. I'll give way.
And Honourable Lady for Brent for bringing this forward, and unfortunately I can't stay for the debate, but I want to have this on record. The Northern Ireland statistics for the murders of women is the highest in all of the United Kingdom. The Minister knows that. So does the Honourable Lady agree with me when it comes to addressing these issues of the murders of women across this United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? There needs to be a strategy that starts here and sweeps out to the rest of the regions so we can better manage it and respond to it and protect our women and the women and ladies and young girls in Northern Ireland but across this United Kingdom.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. I'm sure you'll be forgiven for missing half of the debate today. Absolutely. Women are killed. That is a fact. And we've got too used to talking about the statistics without really thinking about who was at the end of it, the fact that we are losing a woman every 3 days to murder. And it starts somewhere, right? At the end of the day, the way that women are demonised, the way that women are attacked, the way that we attack trans women, it starts somewhere, and it's a deliberate act and action. And I want to thank a lot of the organisations like Fawcett Society, Centenary Action, which I'm co-chair with the Shadow Minister, Asian Women's Resource Centre in Brent. It's important that we start to celebrate women. And Madam Deputy Speaker, when the Mayor renamed the train lines and renamed it the Lioness line that I get on, I was a little bit confused, first of all, when I got the Lioness line, am I on the right train? And then, now I smile, because I think when people say, why is it called the Lioness line, the response is always going to be because there was a really great female football team that brought the cup home. And so this is the little things that we have to do, but I think will make a big difference. And there's a lot of kind of men who feel insecure about that, and we need to tell them, look, don't worry, just chill. You know, there's men that are saying that we shouldn't talk about firsts, women who are first to this or first to do that. And I say, look, we should celebrate and talk about it because it shows a little bit of progress. We still got a far further to go, like the first female speaker of colour in the chair. Congratulations, Madam Speaker. You know, we should celebrate that. The first female Metro Mayor, Tracy Brabham. The first registered blind MP for Battersea, Marsha Dekova. And I could spend my whole time talking about all the firsts. And I think, you know, we should celebrate it because there are more good people in the world than bad. So when I see men in power saying, don't do this, don't celebrate women, don't talk about women, erase women, which is really quite scary that they're literally erasing women and our achievements, I know that there are men in that room who could speak out. I know that there are men in that room who must speak out because actually we have some aggressive male, white, supremacist people that are saying, you know, we don't exist, or we shouldn't exist, or we belong in the kitchen, and that is it. And we cannot go backwards. We have come too far to go backwards, and it ain't going to happen. So I say to people, like, if I was to ban steps, like, bear with me, everyone, if I was to ban steps and replace all steps with a slope, would that stop you from getting to your destination? No, it wouldn't. But would it help people who have problems walking or wheelchair users get to theirs? Yes, it would. So it isn't necessarily about taking something away. It can be about changing it to help other people also get to their destination. So the question I want to pose to those boys and men that are feeling that they have to turn to the far right or they're becoming like incels, involuntary celibate, is it time to change? Is it time for you to change how you talk, your attitude, how you act? Would you like your mother, your sister, your girlfriend, your partner being talked about or treated the way that you treat women? Absolutely.
I think I thank the Honourable Member and my friend for giving way. She's making a powerful speech, and I'm sure all the young women in Brent and North London watching her will be very proud. One of the conversations that often comes up when we're on WhatsApp chats with all the local mothers is about social media. And she's talking a lot about change. The statistics show that 40% of young women and girls, after spending time online and on social media, feel lonely and depressed because of all the online abuse. Could I ask my honourable friend to comment on the fact that I think social media platforms need to take some responsibility on the content that is amplified through their platforms?
Thank my honourable friend for giving way. Social media platforms have a vital role to play. Now, social media platforms, they understand that negativity spreads faster than positivity. It's like in the old days of legacy media where if it bleeds, it leads. They're absolutely aware of the damage that they do. And so we have to, if they're not going to voluntarily make the changes that they need to make to their platform, then we need to, as a government, legislate for those changes to be made. I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. When I watched the story of the War's Only Women's Army Corps Unit of Colour, which stars Kerry Washington as Captain Charity Adams, I actually cried. It's the 688th Central Postal Directory Battalion. They contributed to the war effort in a unique way. What they did was they sorted through 17 million pieces of mail and delivered it to American soldiers on the front line, improving their morale. And that was 855 black women who did that. They brought hope to the front lines, but they were discriminated against, and there was barriers put in their way to stop that happening. And yet still, after going through all of that, history still tried to erase them. And you think, why is that? Why do you continually try to erase women and people of colour out of history?
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and for securing this debate. As we mark International Women's Day, I'm proud to stand here, not just only as a black woman, but a former nurse. I feel absolutely honoured. But black people are 4 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act. Does my honourable friend agree that we can only truly say that we have honoured International Women's Day when this glaring disparity is addressed? Thank you, and thank you.
I thank my honourable friend, and she's also a first, so congratulations. And yes, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend on that point. Madam Deputy Speaker, on average, we will all live to see 80 Christmases. So the thing is, what are you going to do with those 80 Christmases that we are going to live to see? Some people in the world are acting like they're going to live forever. God, I hope not. On average, that won't be the case. But some people pass through the world and leave it just as they found it. Our job in Parliament is to change the world for the better. We need to leave an indelible footprint that stands the test of time in perpetuity. And if we want to impress on that footprint, you must ensure that the world protects women. And the world needs to protect all women, not just straight white women. We should start with the gay women, the black women, the disabled women, because if we protect those, we will protect all women and the world will be a better place. And I often say that I can't get my rights until everybody's got their rights, and our rights and our lives are very much intertwined, whether we sometimes believe it or not. And just because I am pro-women and pro-LGBTQI+, and pro-black, it doesn't mean, as sometimes I'm accused online, that I am anti-white. Far from it. I am pro-jerk chicken and rice and peas, and I still love a bit of pie and mash and fish and chips. You can love more than one thing and be pro many things. And I kind of want to end around this on a really cold reality check. I want to quote Malcolm Gladwell. He wrote a brilliant book called The Tipping Point, and he's recently written an updated one called The Revenge of the Tipping Point. And he talks about the law of the very few. He talks about the overstory and the counterfactual line, like what would have happened if. Now, I feel that we were slowly winning the war on highlighting violence against women and girls, highlighting injustices, highlighting discrimination, but we didn't appreciate the honest conversations we needed to have around how epidemic works, or appreciate the power of group proportions. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are absolutely fooling ourselves if we think that we bear no responsibility for the epidemic that surrounds us in regards to violence against women and girls. Epidemics have rules, they have boundaries, they are subjected to overstories, and we in society are in a position of power to create those overstories. These overstories, they change in size and shape when they reach a tipping point, and it is possible to know when we're reaching that tipping point. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we are currently at that tipping point when it comes to violence against women and girls. And the lessons of the opioid crisis in the US is a lesson for us all. Most of the medical professions acted professionally, but there were a tiny fraction, just a few, who did not, and that was enough to fuel an opioid epidemic in the US. So this tiny fraction of people are driven by a certain class of people, and those people can be identified. And the tools needed to control an epidemic are right in front of us. They are sitting on the table, and we can either grab those tools, or we can let the unscrupulous people grab those tools. But we can grab them and we can build a better world. So I say we need to take action and have the honest conversations. We need to say organisations that believe in DEI, that believe in fair pay, we need to use them. We need to make sure they get procurement contracts. And we need to be mindful about the social media platforms that we use, and we need to elect people who care for lots of people and not just the 1%. And by doing this, we will, as the theme of International Women's Day this year, accelerate action. And I will end with the straight white boys and men who are in the middle of the table, we need your protection. We need your love, we need your care, and we need your kindness. We know, as I've said, that daughters and young girls learn how to be treated by their partners by watching how men treat women in their lives. And little boys and young boys learn how to be men by the men in their lives. So to all men, regardless of colour, class, economic status, we need to lead by example. Women are literally fighting for their lives. And I want every single man who's watching this today in the world to join us in that struggle, because we should all believe in fairness. We should all believe in ending discrimination, homophobia. We should all believe in that. And Madam Deputy Speaker, by the time it has taken me to make this speech, globally, one woman would have been killed by their partner or family member. May her soul rest in peace.
Yeah. The question is as on the order paper, and I call Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it is a privilege to be able to speak in today's International Women's Day, and I thank the member for bringing the debate. And I do want to use this opportunity to pay tribute to the extraordinary contribution of Scottish women, particularly those from my Gordon and Buchan constituency and the wider North East Scotland. When we speak about women breaking barriers, I need to look no further than Meithlick in Aberdeenshire, the birthplace of Dame Evelyn Glennie. Profoundly deaf from the age of 12, Dame Evelyn didn't just overcome this challenge, she revolutionised our understanding of how music can be experienced, feeling vibrations all through her body to become the world's first full-time solo percussionist. With over 100 performances worldwide each year and having commissioned more than 200 new works, she has shown how determination can transform what many would see as a limitation into a unique strength. In Inverurie, which is the largest town in my constituency, we have Hannah Miley, who trained at the Geary Amateur Swimming Club before representing Great Britain at the London 2012 and Rio 2016 Olympics. What many don't know, however, about her remarkable story is that she's spent her life training in a 25-metre pool rather than Olympic-standard 50-metre facilities of her competitors, often sharing lanes with the public. Yet she went on to become a Commonwealth gold medalist and now inspires the next generation of swimmers across Scotland. And in the realm of science, Aberdeen's Professor Dame Anne Glover stands as a testament to Scottish women's intellectual prowess. Not only did she serve as the first Chief Scientific Advisor in Scotland, but also became the first Chief Scientific Advisor to the President of the European Commission. Her pioneering work in microbial biosensors at the University of Aberdeen has placed our region at the forefront of scientific innovation. And in the field of agriculture, which is so important to my Gordon and Buchan constituency, we see women taking ever more prominent roles. Jane Craigie from Aberdeenshire exemplifies this leadership as a co-founder of the Rural Youth Project, which connects young people with opportunities in agriculture. The skills and determination of women farmers are essential to our local economy and the future of Scotland's agricultural sector. And it would be remiss of me also not to mention Professor Lorna Dawson, CBE, who is based in Aberdeen at the James Hutton Institute. As of 2025, she continued her pioneering work in soil forensics and has helped solve numerous criminal cases, advising police investigations across the UK. Professor Dawson also recently was rewarded the RSC James Hutton Medal for her exceptional contribution to earth and environmental sciences. Her work connecting soil science to justice demonstrates how expertise from our region is making a difference both nationally and internationally. And of course, it would be wrong for anyone on these benches not to acknowledge the groundbreaking legacy of Margaret Thatcher, the UK's first female Prime Minister, whose determination to succeed in a male-dominated political world opened doors for women across the political spectrum. Her legacy continues to inspire women in politics every day. And finally, and most important to me, my mum, who was, as far as been reported, the first woman mechanic on an all-weather lifeboat when she joined the crew at a station in Ireland in 1998. There really is nothing more inspiring, if not a bit scary, as an 8-year-old, watching your mum pull on her dry suit and heading out to sea in gale force conditions. And she would not forgive me if I did not emphasise the open-mindedness of the men on the crew who, almost 30 years ago, were willing and able to see the potential, not gender. With my mum telling me just this morning, I was only able to become a mechanic because the crew were willing to give me a chance. Decades of tradition with fishermen took me to sea and allowed me to achieve, particularly Tony, the coxswain. If the crew hadn't been so open-minded, I wouldn't have become one. Madam Deputy Speaker, let us use this International Women's Day to reaffirm our commitment to empowering women and creating a more equitable future for all. Thank you.
Select Committee Chair, Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend from Brent East for introducing this incredibly important International Women's Day debate. And it always is well attended, but it is also one of the most informative and heartfelt debates that we have in Parliament. And I am incredibly proud to be taking part in this day's debate as the chair of the Women and Equality Select Committee. And it's been said that we've had quite a flying start. We have done a lot, but I answer with the fact that there is a lot to do. The International Women's Day theme, it's already been said, is accelerate action, and we know that we cannot slow down. We do have to accelerate, and not just words, but with action. So, on behalf of my whole committee, I am very proud to say that we won't be slowing down anytime soon. We have focused our work in less than a year very much on key areas, and following on from the fantastic work of the previous committee as well, particularly around health. And last year we produced a report around women's reproductive health, and it was titled Medical Misogyny. And some people said that's quite strong, but quite frankly, we couldn't describe the evidence that we had seen in the inquiry as anything other than medical misogyny. Diagnosis for adenomyosis and endometriosis, on average 8 years. That's average. So there are people waiting much longer than 8 years for diagnosis, not treatment, diagnosis. Women being ignored, being left in pain. The amount of women that I know that have got adenomyosis or endometriosis eventually, who had been fobbed off time and time again from medical practitioners and from doctors, told, have some paracetamol and a hot water bottle and a lie down and you'll be fine. Again, another example where women are ignored at the detriment of their health, but also our country's health and our economy's health as well. Painful procedures still taking place for women without any offer of pain relief. Hysteroscopies, IUD fittings, sharp pinch. No, not a sharp pinch. Not a sharp pinch. Not on my Nelly is that a sharp pinch. And again, that sort of pain that women have to endure. I am grateful that men don't have to, but why is it that women still have to? Even though the guidelines have changed, women are still having to go through incredibly painful procedures without the relief that they deserve. And in terms of education, one of the other recommendations from our report was clear that we need to educate our young people better as to what to expect for women's reproductive health. That goes for boys as well as girls. We need to end this stigma of periods and period poverty in particular, but also for young people to know what is normal. We were quite often told that it's normal that your period's going to hurt, that you are going to bleed, that you're going to be uncomfortable, but it is not normal to be curled up in bed for 7 days. No. It is not normal for your periods or for your menstrual cycle to be so painful you cannot go to school, you cannot take part in PE, you cannot go to work. All of these things are not normal, yet we have been ingrained in ourselves that it is normal for us to be in pain, it is normal for our lives to be disrupted by our hormones and everything that's happening with our body, and it's not. It frankly isn't. So that is why one of the recommendations was very clear that we need to do better to educate ourselves and our young people and enable our educators to have the tools and the resources to ensure the next generation of women and young men know exactly what happens to a woman's body. And when it comes to research, this was something that stuck out in my mind when we were doing the report. Far too much research has been tailored towards men and men's medical needs. We know that the average paracetamol dose, for example, is actually the dosage, the correct dosage for a Western male, not for a woman. It's the same for seatbelts and everything else. But here's something for you. 5 times more research goes into erectile dysfunction, which affects 19% of men, than PMS, which affects 90% of women. So when we are talking about action, we need to see it across the board, particularly in health. And there is progress, absolutely. I'm so proud that we're going to be seeing the Employment Rights Bill come forward next week. But there is always ways to improve, always. And the committee has produced a report in January that looks specifically at miscarriage bereavement leave. This is an issue that is very close to my heart, and I know many in this chamber and outside of this chamber have campaigned long for the right to grieve the loss of a pregnancy following miscarriage at work. And we've seen some movement, and that is incredibly welcome. Now is time for action. There are thousands of employers out there that already offer bereavement leave for workers that miscarry. And many of them are private sector employers, and they're not doing it out of the kindness of their hearts, let's be honest. They're doing it because it is financially a rewarding thing to do, it's reputationally good, and it's good for your workers. There are massive companies like TUI, who I went to visit last week at the hangar in Luton Airport, and yeah, I did not contain the inner child within me when I sat in a cockpit, I will tell you that. But once I'd gathered myself, I said, where are all the women engineers? And they said they're really struggling, they want to have more women engineers. Where are your women apprentices? They have fantastic apprenticeships there. And they are so right, and they're ready. And I said, what are your workplace policies for miscarriage? And they said, do you know what I wish more people knew? They offer time off for grief, for miscarriage bereavement leave. So there are companies out there that are doing the right thing and trying to make sure that the workplace is right for women. The co-op group is another one. But looking at public sector employers, the NHS offers miscarriage bereavement leave for its workers. The NHS, the largest public sector employer of women in our country, offers bereavement leave for those that miscarry. And I have had them sat in front of me in 2 different committees, one at the Public Accounts Committee pre-election and one now as Women and Equality Select Committee. And I asked them twice, how much does this cost? The Chief Finance Officer for the NHS said de minimis. Translation, basically nothing. But it is not costing them anything to offer this. If anything, it's saving them. In terms of staff retention, in terms of length of time off sick, When you do not grieve well and you do not have the space to grieve and the time to grieve, you store up problems longer term. And I think society has caught up with that. It's time, the law has, because the difference that a change in law here could make is one that not only did we hear about in the Select Committee from the women that were brave enough to give testimony to their experiences of multiple miscarriages, of having to drive themselves to hospital because their partner or their husband couldn't take time off and nearly bleeding to death along the way. I know the difference it could make when I had, and how angry I was when I had to take sick pay. When I had my 3 miscarriages, people were really lovely. I was very open about it. But not one single person said to me, get better soon. They said, I'm sorry for your loss. Now, if society has moved on and realises that miscarriage and pregnancy loss is a loss and not a sickness, it's time our law did as well. Thank you. In terms of maternal health, I know that there will, as has already been mentioned from my good friend from Birmingham-Erdington in her intervention, I know that we'll hear more about the need to close the gap on maternal death rates for black mothers. Chloe and Tanike at 5 times more are doing fantastic work on this, and I praise everybody that is working to close that gap because it is much needed. And yesterday at the Select Committee we heard evidence on female genital mutilation, FGM. There are estimated 137,000 victims of FGM in our country. I fear that actually that number is much higher from the evidence that we heard yesterday in terms of the levels of underreporting, and that there was much noise and much movement and progress made 10 years ago, but that progress has stalled. Some of the training manuals for doctors and midwives are 10 years out of date. They are well past time for review. And in the time that we've had this movement in the last 10 years, we've seen about 3 prosecutions for FGM. I know that actually prosecution isn't perhaps where we need to be. I don't want to predetermine the outcome of a report, but prevention is a huge part of this answer, and we will present our report accordingly. Another area which we have produced a report is around technology, and I know that my honourable friend has already touched on this, but we've produced a very chunky report on non-consensual intimate image abuse, NCII. It's a deeply personal crime which can have life-changing and life-threatening consequences, as the lived experience of inquiry witness Georgia Harrison demonstrates. The committee heard shocking evidence of its scale and impact, with a 10-fold increase in just 4 years, and reported cases of more than 22,000 in 2024. Every victim of a sexual offence deserves to be treated with respect and have their case investigated promptly and effectively by the police. However, that is not what we heard. In many cases, police treat victims of intimate image abuse has been characterised by a lack of understanding, and in some cases misogyny, with officers choosing to patronise victims rather than support them. This is totally unacceptable and must change. We of course welcome the government's proposals to make creating NCII an offence, but a legal gap remains. NCII can continue to circulate online years after the image was posted. While many sites will eventually remove the content when prompted, around 10% don't. There is yet not enough in the government's proposals in the Crime and Policing Bill to address this concern. We would love to see the government bring forward amendments to the Crime and Policing Bill to make possession of NCII an offence, in addition to its creation. This will put NCII on the same footing as CSAM in how it is treated online, and we hope will provide the necessary encouragement to block or disrupt access to such content which has been hosted overseas in particular. There's also work that we are doing on community cohesion, gendered Islamophobia, shared parental leave, women in business and entrepreneurs, which is incredibly important because the government is focused on growth. Women must play a significant part of that. So there's a lot that I could talk about. There's far too much in this speech already, and I'm sure that there'll be loads in this debate. But we live in an increasingly divisive world, and women are at the sharp end of it. Why do we even need International Women's Day debate? To be honest, I wish we didn't. I really wish we didn't. But we need it because progress is not inevitable. We're seeing in countries like Iraq the lowering of age of consent to 9. 9 and consent. Those two words do not go together. A child cannot give consent. Women's bodies being used as weapons of war in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Kashmir, in the Middle East, in Xinjiang. The list goes on. It is harder to be a woman than it should be. One day, I really hope that we won't need International Women's Day to highlight the problems or ask for action, but to celebrate the progress. Because there has been progress made, and I want to end on a high note, which is sport. Women's sport, love it, absolutely adore it. I know that there are some big fans here. From the Lionesses to Luton Town ladies, there are fantastic successes, and I am so glad that when I said to my 5-year-old girl now, I was like all excited when the Lionesses were on television. I was like, look at this, look at women's football, it's on the television. She looked at me and she went, yeah, shrugged her shoulders. And for her, this is the norm. Yeah. It's not something special. For me, it's something special to see that. But for her, it's the norm. And I want it to be the norm for every little girl in our country. Yeah. And now I'm going to do something a little bit left field for me. I went to an event, a sports event, a Sky Sports event, and it was fantastic. Sporty Spice was there, so the 16-year-old me was even more excited than in the cockpit of a plane. But there were sportswomen, fantastic sportswomen, but also the people that support and show that sport and show that there is money to be had from it and that there is progress to be had from it and that people want to watch it and people want to consume it and people want to cheer from the stands. They want to cheer sportswomen on. And at the start of it, there was this incredible spoken word piece. There was also a song, I'm not going to sing, don't worry, by a fantastic and beautiful artist called Sophia Tucker. We all know that famous Barbie monologue. We've all heard it, haven't we? For me, this just goes one step further, and I'm going to read and end by reading just a little bit of what she said. It's called Gladiators. They say you're strong for a girl, or fast for a woman. How can she be a girl? How can gold be a woman? They call you a butterfly because they see those wings. I know you're the eagle type, high above these things. They say act like a girl, but the whole world wouldn't be if we deceived our power. The land trembles as we rise from the dust came our towers, but we meet these mountains that we are expected to climb. But with no sweat, no muscles, no grind, but with makeup and gentleness and the kind of competitiveness that's comfortable for them and kind. They're like, would you mind maintaining your shape, your figure eight? Don't get too strong. Practice a soft voice and some grace, but still win. Still first place, but like a lady might. Funny there. It's when I'm my strongest I feel most like the lady type. When these legs activate and I can jump to crazy heights. When these shoulders broaden and I can carry both the world and its opinion straight to the finish. God bless these arms, the strength in these arms. Ah, how they've held me over the years, and God bless the sisters I have found sat across from my fears. This table is laid before us in the presence of our frenemies. We're celebrated for our wins, whilst they berate our anatomy. To be a woman is to live twice. To live firstly for the thing that you love, and then a second life for the fight. One mind for the gain, and then this other for the might. That it might take to still choose this day after day. So give the girls 2 gold medals. Give the women double pay. Give them triple their portion. Let your applause reverberate. Sing her song. When you sing of the greats and strike for a woman from after her name, because if she has changed the face of the whole game, she is victorious over history. Would you like to be as you grow? Who would you like to become as you age? Would you like to be pretty, have your face across pages, or would you like to be demure, known for your softness and your patience, or a girl? Tell me how you would like to become a gladiator. To all the women gladiators in this place, past and present and outside of this place, thank you. One day, International Women's Day will be about the realisation of all our hopes and ambitions. Until that day, I'm proud to be gladiators with you. Yeah.
And we are starting with an immediate 4-minute time limit. Liz Saville-Roberts.
I'm honoured to speak at this debate in advance of International Women's Day on Saturday, the 8th of March, which I'll be celebrating with the all-women steam train crew at Railford Tallaghyn Railway in Tywyn. The day, of course, remains as relevant now as ever, and we and the generations of women who've come before us have achieved so much since the first International Women's Day in 1911. But we still have a long way to go. When we talk about a gender-equal society, let's be clear about where we mean. In the home, in public spaces, in the workplace. Here in Westminster, we celebrate that 40% of this Parliament are now women. Indeed, we were taking a photograph just yesterday morning to that effect. And in the Senate, the cross-party Women's Caucus has been re-established, a bold show of force between women across the political divides. These are positive steps towards a gender balance, but not necessarily towards gender equality, including equally safe workplaces, about which I want to speak now. Now, honourable friends will know that a 2023 2UC poll found that 3 in 5 women have experienced sexual harassment, bullying or verbal abuse in the workplace, and reports of sexual assault, rape, stalking and coercive control from colleagues make up 50% of calls made to Rights of Women's Sexual Harassment at Work advice line. But as it stands, protections are limited. The Workers' Protection Act 2023 created a preventative duty for employers to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace, but an automatic investigation into a breach of this duty only takes place after an individual successfully brings a claim of sexual harassment, and many other forms of gender-based violence in the workplace are excluded. Meanwhile, the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, which of course is so familiar to employers, it places a duty on employers to ensure the health and safety and welfare of employees at work. So why not use the toughest mechanism we have in the workplace to tackle workplace gender-based harassment and violence too? That's exactly what my Health and Safety at Work etc. Act 1974 Amendment Bill, developed with the brilliant Susie Lamplugh Trust and Rights of Women, seeks to do, alongside new clauses to the same effect, new clauses 39 and 40 to the Employment Rights Bill. And I would hope my honourable friends would consider supporting these. My bill introduces clear, actionable duties for employers to protect workers from violence and harassment, including risk assessments and policy development and the provision of recognition and prevention training to all employees. Those boring-sounding things that make a difference in the workplace, that would make a difference to people's lives. And it mandates the Health and Safety Executive, which does not currently consider gender-based violence a workplace hazard and is not viewed as the primary authority for bullying, harassment or domestic abuse in the workplace, to develop and publish an enforceable health and safety framework on violence and harassment in the workplace and to issue guidance for employers. Now, leveraging health and safety legal frameworks that are already in place will require employers to actively work towards eliminating gender-based violence, establishing a systematic and publicly enforceable approach to the prevention of and safeguarding from the spectrum of gender-based violence in the workplace. So to close, if these are the differences that we wish to make, the differences to women's lives in the workplace, let us use all the powers that we have at our disposal and make them work for women more effectively than they presently do. Let's use all our powers. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi all. I hope we all enjoy International Women's Day on Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah. I call Natalie, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's an honour to be here today as the first MP to represent Bolsover, who is a woman. Thank you. I'm surrounded by fantastic women, not only here, but also in Bolsover. Women that run businesses and nurture our next generation, like foster carer Sonia Dayson in Cresswell. Inspire us as community leaders, like Helen Marriott of Pinkston Scouts, with nearly 4 decades of dedication. And support charities to thrive and fight to make a difference with tenacity, like Edwina Khan of Bolsover Woodland Enterprise. I'm going to spend this week celebrating them all and more. What I want to talk about today is the issues that affect us as women that are being hidden, too often our private burden. If we look at the last Parliament, the BBC was discussed more often than childcare. You were 5 times more likely to hear about fishing than you were the menopause. This historic house that women died to get us into spent more time discussing football than rape. My daughter tells me she's brave and wonderful, and she tells me, Mum, every time you talk about rape, every time you say the word, I bristle. Please do not stop. And my baby, my little baby, is about to start big school. And the data tells me that while she's there, she will witness sexual harassment, potentially be sent dick pics, and there is nothing that I can do to protect her from that. This isn't a class thing, this isn't an age thing. It doesn't matter where you go back. Mary, Queen of Scots, it's an accepted part of her story that the nobles chose amongst them who was going to rape her with the intention of impregnating her. Yet we still don't accept that that happens in the UK. 10 births every day from rape. No charity to support these women. No advice on the NHS website. Men that can access these children anytime that they like. Every single one of us has either been raped or knows somebody who has been raped. Rape is a part of our story as women. Yet it's a part that we don't tell. So I want to tell you about rape and being an MP. Rape threats are an accepted part of the job. Thank you to the Minister for speaking up about this disgusting truth. I am the 690th woman MP, so Rape Crisis estimates that a quarter of women have been raped or sexually assaulted. If we apply that data to MPs, that means 172 of us have been raped. Half of those, 86 women MPs, will have been raped more than once. Statistically, 28 of them will have reported this. And if there's a miracle, at the very best on an optimistic day, there's a potential that one could have led to conviction.
Will my honourable friend give way? Yeah. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank my honourable friend for giving way. An extremely powerful speech. Can she remind everybody the importance not only of the fact of rape, but also the importance of how we make sure that we prosecute and convict the perpetrators of those rapes, so that we remember that this is not simply about a passive violence against women and girls, but we identify the causes and the people who do the actual crimes.
Yeah. Thank you to my friend for her intervention. I'm proud to be part of a government that set out an unprecedented ambition to halve violence against women and girls. But what I want us to think about together on this day is how we tell our story. Now, I've spoken publicly about giving birth after being the victim of statutory rape, and I am sick of being told I am brave. I don't want to be brave. I want it to be expected that we tell our truth. So, courage calls the courage everywhere. Let's make it normal to talk about rape in workplaces, in kitchens, with friends. Instead of bristling, let's talk about it like we talk about football. Talk to our boys about consent and celebrate the men that are our allies. Most importantly, listen to her, support her, and for God's sake, believe her. So if you are one of the colleagues, the friends, the constituents that have told me about your rape, I ask you to tell each other. You'll be surprised by how many people believe you and then share their story with you too. I am a very proud nana of a very beautiful granddaughter. She's 4 weeks old and she's named after one of the suffragettes that means that I'm here today. And I genuinely believe if we are brave now and make speaking out the norm, we can have a world where she tells her grandchildren about the fact that they did it and we hid it. And I want that to be the part that her grandchildren don't believe. So there's a lot to do and it can feel overwhelming, but let's put our arms around each other and use our power to force that shame to change sides.
Carolyn Jopp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think International Women's Day is a fantastic day because it gives me the opportunity to pay tribute to someone whose birthday would have been on International Women's Day had she not been born in 1909. And I hope that she passes the gladiator bar that the member for Luton North referred. Her name was Beatrice Shilling, and she's one of the most consequential people of the 20th century that you've never heard of. She was born in Waterlooville in Hampshire in 1909 and soon became one of those children who loved taking things to bits. She won a Meccano prize. She saved up her pocket money at the age of 14. She bought her first motorbike. By the time it was 1936, she was only the second woman ever to record an average speed of 100 miles an hour round the Brooklands circuit just over the River Thames from my constituency in Spelthorne. By 1939, she was at the Royal Aeronautical and Engineering Establishment. Obviously, the Second World War was upon us, and crucially, the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine used in the Hurricanes and the Spitfires had a fatal flaw. Once you went into a negative G dive, the engine had a propensity to flood and cut out. The Germans didn't have that problem because they had a fuel injector. And obviously, they soon worked out that the British pilots were in this dilemma as to whether to follow them or not. Could have been catastrophic. So they turned to Tilly Shilling, as she was universally known, to come up with a solution. And she invented a small thing, the size of a thimble, with a little hole in it, which could be crucially fitted to the fuel line of the Merlin engine without taking the plane to bits, meaning that the much-needed air power of the Second World War could remain in the fight. She was subject to a certain amount of male condescension, inasmuch as her device, which she had designed, was referred to as Miss Shilling's orifice. However, no one minded the fact that when fitted to those planes, they kept them in the fight, and she contributed an extraordinary amount to the winning of the Second World War. And so I really welcome International Women's Day because it gives me the chance to tell that story. And at a time when clouds are darkening again around the world and we are having to rearm as a nation, and as we've also heard in this debate, we must encourage as much as possible the Tilly Shillings of tomorrow to come forward in order to contribute to our defence and aerospace industry. I hope that the story of Tilly Shilling will act as an inspiration to many, many people across this country to see that they can make a huge contribution to our national defence. Thank you very much indeed.
I call Carolyn Harris.
Deputy Speaker. In my almost 10 years in this place, I've become somewhat vocal on women's issues. Some would call me a ferocious campaigner, and there's a challenging mouthpiece, but I'll take both. But my passion to ensure that women get access to the support and services they need is what drives me. From women struggling through the menopause to women in prison, women who are victims of domestic violence, of human trafficking or of modern slavery, it has been my mission to use this platform to be their voice. But today I want to speak about an industry that is powered by women, but is all too often overlooked and undervalued. As a former co-chair with Madam Deputy Speaker of the Beauty and Wellbeing APPG in the last Parliament, a group that we currently are reconvening, I have often spoken about the personal care sector. We championed them during the pandemic when they were belittled by those in power and were amongst the last businesses to reopen. And since then, we continue to promote the contribution they make to our economy, as well as the physical health and mental well-being benefits that they bring to society. More than 80% of those working in the personal care industry are women, and the industry has one of the biggest rates of business ownerships compared to any other sector, especially for women. In fact, women are 4 times more likely to own a personal care business than in any other sector. The Federation of Small Businesses Future of the High Street report recognised that women owners of SMEs were more likely to engage with their communities, but also highlighted the difficulties women faced with excessively high rental costs, when they would typically be earning less than their male counterparts. So while sparing the brunt of the time and cost of demands of raising a family, it is therefore especially encouraging to see beauty and well-being businesses, predominantly owned and staffed by women, continue to open and thrive. And they really are thriving. In 2023, there was an 11% year-on-year growth in GDP contribution from the industry to 27.2 billion. The same year saw a 10% increase in the industry's workforce, with businesses employing 418,000 people. Professional services such as salons directly employed 224,000, of which 180,000 were women. Every day this industry plays a role in our lives, from the products we buy to the services we use. They keep us clean, enhance our appearance, and help to protect our physical and mental health. So can we wish every woman who works in the personal care service or owns a business, because let's face it, they'll probably be working all day Saturday. Yeah. So can we wish them a very happy International Women's Day?
Yeah. I call Seamus... I am imposing an immediate 3-minute time limit before I call Seamus Logan. Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a true privilege to speak at this year's debate. I want to start by acknowledging just some of the women in Scottish politics who are inspiring and paving the way for future generations of women in Scotland, especially the next generation of female politicians. Of course, I want to start by acknowledging our Chief Whip, a member for Aberdeen North, who sadly can't be here today. I'm sure she would love to be here. Our MSP for Banff and Buchan, Karen Adam, and only two of our local councillors in Aberdeenshire, Gwyneth Petrie, our council group leader, the opposition group leader, and our group chair, Louise McAllister. I also want to pay tribute to the tireless work done by Sally Donald, a member of staff for my neighbouring MP for Moray West, Nirn and Strathspey, as co-chair of Parley Gender, the workplace equality network advocating for gender equality in Parliament. She has introduced a mentorship scheme for female members of staff, which has been very popular, showing the demand for such schemes in this place. While I stand here and thank the women that have committed their time, energy and lives to the people of Scotland, I want to take a second to note that at our current pace, a girl born today will be nearly 40 years old before women in this place hold as many seats in Parliament as men. This is a devastating statistic in the face of this year's theme, rights, equality and empowerment. Though we are currently honoured to be in a Parliament which is the highest number of female MPs in history, let us not forget that women were only able to stand in elections as late as 1918. Up until 1997, women had never held more than 10% of seats in Parliament. On this day, dedicated to the rights, equality and empowerment of all women, I want to acknowledge the additional challenges which exist for women in today's society, more so the obstacles that they face to enter the world of politics and those that persist once they are here. I want to acknowledge how much stronger and more diverse this House would be with more female colleagues sitting in these benches. I want to finally pay tribute to those great women of our independence movement in Scotland. Too many to mention, but just two. The late great Winnie Ewing, and also who was an MP here, and also the late president of Fraserburgh SNP branch, Nancy Duthie. I'm endlessly inspired by my female colleagues and the female members in these benches. I want to ask the Minister what initiatives the Government are taking to encourage more women and girls to access a career in politics, so that they may follow in the footsteps of all my female colleagues and ensure that the equal rights of all women are at the core of everything that this Parliament is working towards. Finally, I'll just recognise the member for Brent East in bringing this debate today, and also the very powerful speech that you made. And I'll also mention briefly the member for Bolsover speaks about the need for us to speak out about rape cases. In the slaps debate in November, I brought notice to the Minister that day about a rape case, and I was promised a ministerial meeting, and I'm still waiting on that meeting, and that was 5 months ago. So perhaps the Minister could respond to that. Thank you.
I call Harpreet Uppal.
Speaker, and thank you to the member for Brent East for bringing forward this important debate. It's with huge pride that I stand here today as the first woman MP for Huddersfield. Thank you, but hopefully not the last. And female leadership continues in my local area with a female leader of the council and our fantastic West Yorkshire Mayor Tracy Brabin and Alison Lowe. And of course I have to mention you, Madam Deputy Speaker, as well as a proud Yorkshire woman. That's absolutely fantastic. International Women's Day is a fantastic day to celebrate the achievements of women, but also marks a call to action for accelerating women's equality. Around the world, we are witnessing a growing pushback against women's rights, advances which were painstakingly made over decades. As parliamentarians in this chamber, we have a particular responsibility to ensure that we can do everything we can to progress women's and girls' equality, to fight back against the culture wars, from those who try and give easy and angry responses to complex problems, which too many times pit us against each other when many of us are fighting for the same goals. I recently attended a Reclaim the Night march in Huddersfield. The first of these took place in Leeds back in 1977. As with those first very powerful marches in the 1970s, we were there to renew our commitment to building a future free from violence against women and girls, to assert our right to go out without fear, whatever time of day or night it is. Recent data shows that 2 million women are estimated to be victims of violence perpetrated by men each year. That's 1 in 12 women. Police chiefs have also warned of young men being radicalised online by so-called influencers. As the Safeguarding Minister, the member for Birmingham Yardley said, the scale of violence against women and girls in our country is intolerable, and this government will treat it as the national emergency that it is. And I'm very proud that she is in this role doing this work. We are lucky, well, we're not lucky. I am proud that we have more women in this parliament than we've ever had, but we're still at 40%, so there's still more to do. And I'm glad that a women's caucus has been established to look at issues on a cross-party basis. But the onus on this can't be just on women. We must all act together and say enough is enough. I want to particularly know a couple of local organisations in Huddersfield who work really hard to support women, and this includes Pennine Domestic Abuse Partnership, Kirklees Rape and Sexual Assault Centre, the Women's Centre, the Lipstick Project, amongst many others. And if I could just quickly mention the responsibility of social media giants in curtailing the behaviour online. We must simply ask, are they doing enough? And if the answer is no, we have to demand more. And it cannot be right at times that algorithms are driving this destructive and divisive behaviour.
I call Alison Griffiths.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the 649th woman to be elected to this House, it is an honour to be called today to contribute to this important debate, and I thank the honourable member for Brent East for her contribution and for bringing this debate. I am struck that with 650 members of this House, we are only now, in this Parliament, reaching the threshold where the number of female MPs actually matches it. I'm particularly proud to be one of only 8 newly elected Conservative MPs, standing alongside 18 distinguished Conservative incumbent female colleagues who have set the bar high. Their dedication, resilience and leadership continues to inspire me and countless women across the country. My journey to this place has been a long one that began 15 years ago when I first joined the Conservative candidates list. However, like many, my journey actually started far earlier, as I spent far too many years thinking of running without ever putting my name forward or making it known that this is what I might want to do. As Conservatives, we champion equal opportunities for everyone across the United Kingdom, ensuring that individuals, regardless of their sex, their race or their background, can achieve their full potential. We are the only political party to have elected a female Prime Minister. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. We made history with Margaret Thatcher's election in 1979, and we continue to make history today under the leadership of Kemi Badenoch, our fourth female leader. In government, we took action to support women at work, ensuring that over 2 million more women entered paid employment between 2010 and 2023, boosting our economy and securing financial independence for many. It's why we launched the Women's Health Strategy, ensuring better healthcare outcomes for women, and why we restored sex-specific language to the NHS to protect female-only medical care. It's why we introduced 30 hours of free childcare per week for working parents, easing the burden on families and supporting mothers who want to return to work. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is still more work to do, and there always will be. As Conservatives, we will always fight to ensure that every woman, no matter her background, can reach her full potential.
I call Lillian Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's an honour to speak in this debate, which has been secured by my right honourable friend for Brent East. International Women's Day, observed every year on 8th of March, is a day dedicated to recognising the invaluable contributions women have made in every sphere of life: social, political, economic and cultural. It is a day to celebrate women's successes, but it is also a day to look at the challenges that remain and to reinforce the resolve to dismantle the barriers that continue to impede the progress of women and girls everywhere. In 1908, a group of women garment workers in New York City took to the streets to protest for better wages and working conditions. That same year, the Socialist Party of America organised the first National Women's Day in honour of those women who were demanding their rights. It wasn't until 1975, however, that the United Nations formally began recognising the 8th of March as International Women's Day. What began as a call for social change in the early 20th century has evolved into a global celebration and recognition of women's achievements and struggles. But as we celebrate, we must remember that this day is not only about celebration, it's about progress. While so much has been achieved, we must also acknowledge the challenges and inequalities that persist. For example, women in many parts of the world still earn, on average, only 70 to 80% of what men make for the same work. This gap widens in the corporate world, where women are often underrepresented in leadership and decision-making positions. Around 33% of women globally face physical or sexual violence, with rates higher in conflict zones. Educational opportunities for girls, especially in underprivileged regions, remain a challenge, and the list of issues continues. Moreover, women of colour, LGBT women and women with disabilities often experience multiple layers of discrimination that amplify the challenges they face. This intersectionality reminds us that gender equality is not a one-size-fits-all endeavour, and it is crucial that we consider the unique experiences of all women as we work toward more inclusivity. Throughout history, women have been leaders, innovators and change-makers, often in the face of immense adversity. From Marie Curie's groundbreaking scientific discoveries to Malala Yousafzai's advocacy for girls' education, women have demonstrated resilience and strength. In politics, leaders like Angela Merkel, Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf and Jacinda Ardern have proven that women can lead nations with wisdom, compassion and strength. Women have also been the driving force in movements for social justice, environmental sustainability and human rights. The Me Too movement, started by activist Tarana Burke, has empowered countless women to share their stories and demand an end to sexual harassment and violence. These women and countless others remind us of the transformative power that women hold when given the opportunity, support and resources to succeed. They have pushed the boundaries, shattered glass ceilings and paved the way for future generations of women to thrive. Their efforts demonstrate that when women are empowered, all of society benefits. Thank you, Madam.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are many women in my constituency of Bridgwater who are doing incredible things, and I'm pleased to be able to speak in this debate on International Women's Day. Judith Ballard, Moira Allen, Molly and Rachel Fitton and Joy Russell are all leading members of the Save Paul at Ham's Action Group, who successfully convinced EDF they should not destroy a beloved local area of natural beauty with an unwanted salt marsh. Rose Stacey is a successful local business owner who I nominated for an MP's Hero Award for her work in our community and the local people that she employs. Nikki Miles visited me in Parliament to raise awareness around the dangers of gambling addiction in memory of her brother Del. Amy Branson, along with her husband Ben, have campaigned on the injustice of sentencing guidelines in memory of their daughter Bethany, who was killed by a drunk driver in 2022. Emma Elizabeth Murphy is a special constable who brought my attention to the fact that specials do not get to request unpaid time off work like magistrates or councillors. It is she that inspired me to submit my upcoming amendment to the Employment Rights Bill. And honourable members opposite can show their support by co-signing new Clause 30. Madam Deputy Speaker, I particularly want to pay tribute today to the Nelson Trust Somerset Women's Centre based in Bridgwater. Celebrating its 40th year this year, the Nelson Trust provides a one-stop shop support to over 5,000 women annually from its network of women's centres across the South West and Wales. The centres are safe, women-only spaces provided for women who experience multiple unmet needs, such as homelessness, addiction, mental ill health, domestic and sexual abuse, and familial separation. Having seen the huge difference the centre makes to some of the most vulnerable women in my constituency, I want to pay tribute to Gemma Berry and Lorna Griffiths for their incredible work, for their service not only to women, to our whole community. Thank you.
I call Belle Ribeiro-Addy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to start by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Brent East, for bringing forward this vital debate. She's a true champion of women's issues and an inspiration to many. Now, 2158. That is not my number. We've got a long way to go before we get to that. That is actually the year, at the current rate of progress, that will see full gender parity in 133 years, or 5 generations of girls who continue to live under a system of gender inequality. Could you imagine if the leaders of the suffragette movement knew that in spite of their heroic actions, it would take another 10 generations before we achieved equality of the sexes? And that's why this year's theme is appropriate, accelerate action, because the current rate of action is unacceptable. Now, there are a number of areas that will require focus if we're going to accelerate progress, but I want to focus on women's health. Members would have heard me speak often about racial disparities in maternity care and the disproportionate rate of fatality for black mothers, and more needs to be done to address this, but the issues of maternity are now worsening for all women in this country. When I first raised the issue of black maternal health in this House, black women were 4 times more likely to die in pregnancy and childbirth. That has now reduced to just over 3 times, and awareness has played a huge role in this. So I pay tribute to 5 times more and other organisations that have done so much to raise awareness. But regrettably, most of this decrease is not because maternity services are improving. The rate of women and babies of all ethnicities dying in pregnancy and childbirth in this country has increased in the past 2 decades. Now, the UK sits in the middle to low range of maternal mortality compared to the global standard, but we really shouldn't settle for that, not for racial disparities and not for poor maternal care, especially when our maternal mortality rate is far higher than those of other high-income countries like Iceland, Norway and Finland. And it's not just maternity care where women are being failed. Women's health issues have long been overlooked, with men historically being treated as a default. Now, for many men, it's just a physical exam and a few questions to be diagnosed for something, as we've heard of, like erectile dysfunction. But it takes 8 years for women to receive a diagnosis for endometriosis. That's every 7.5 seconds a man is prescribed ED medication, while it takes 8 years for women to be diagnosed with endometriosis. And we still know next to nothing about the causes of symptoms and diagnosis for the management of things like PCOS, despite it also impacting 1 in 8 women. Even periods we know so little about. almost every person who's experienced one understands the pain and discomfort, and for many men who are still wondering, yes, a period cramp is typically more painful than testicular trauma at its least, and at its most as intense as a heart attack. And you know, research has shown, or rather, only 2.5% of publicly funded research is actually dedicated to reproductive health, when 90% of women are suffering from these issues. Women feel gaslit by their MPs, told to go on painkillers, and there's so much more that they are not receiving when they go and ask for help with their healthcare. We can't fight for gender equality when the disparity of treatment of women's health conditions is so stark. And I don't imagine that next International Women's Day will have a complete gender equality, but I do hope that we see some concrete steps to get there with health. Thank you.
I call Apra Brandreth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is a saying that has always resonated with me. When you get to the top, send the lift back down. For those of us in such a privileged position to sit on these green benches, we hold a responsibility to speak up for and to support women. And I'm proud to be an honorary Vice President of the Conservative Women's Organisation, the oldest women's political organisation in the world, who do so much to inspire, encourage and mentor women as they progress in roles in politics and public life. Time is short, so I just wanted to take a few moments to share with the House some examples of inspiring women in Chester South and Eddisbury. Women like Diane Warby, an entrepreneur who owns and runs her company, Global Air Training, near Tattenhall, an industry leader and putting Chester South and Eddisbury on the aviation map. Women like Helen Bebbington, a dairy farmer near Tarvin. Every morning she gets up at 4 a.m. to attend to her stock. She works from dawn till dusk in order to keep her farm going. According to a recent RABI survey, women in farming, particularly young women, have the worst mental health scores. I've spoken on numerous occasions in this House about the importance of our family farms and mental health. Women are the backbone of the rural community and they deserve to be celebrated today. And women like Councillor Rachel Williams from Malpas, who every month cooks a community lunch, bringing people together, combating loneliness and isolation, and supporting others. International Women's Day is, of course, not just a chance to celebrate women, but also to highlight where there is still vital work to be done. Too many women face domestic violence. It is important that women know that we in this House are here for them. And I very much welcome the government's commitment to halve violence against women and girls. And I was pleased to be able to support the Institute for Addressing Strangulation at the end of last year in writing to the Minister to emphasise the vitally important work that they are doing. 2/3 of domestic violence cases at some point will include a woman being strangled. It is a red line in terms of escalation of violence. If a woman has been subject to strangling, the probability that she will go on to be murdered in the future will increase by 7-fold. I'm very grateful to the Minister, who subsequently committed to funding the Institute for another year to ensure that the vital work that they do can continue. Together we must speak up and deliver change on behalf of all women on matters such as these. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is the honour and privilege of my life to be the 575th female Member of Parliament to be elected to this House, and I am committed to using the time I have here to do what I can to inspire, support, champion and speak up for women and girls. Together, we can accelerate action.
I call Kat Eccles.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Friend for Brent East for bringing this important debate and to all members for their powerful contributions. My constituency of Stourbridge has a proud history of only electing women since the seat was reintroduced in 1997, and I'm honoured to continue that tradition today as the 680th female MP. Representation matters. Stourbridge is home to so many incredible women who provide much for our constituency, but I worry that in a society which can feel that it moves so fast at times, we may forget to take the time to make our appreciation truly known to one another as often as we should. In my role, I'm fortunate enough to interact with many of the amazing women in my constituency. And that's why this year I launched the Sisters of Stourbridge Awards, a chance to shine a light on some of the incredible women making a difference every single day. And I would like to tell you about them, Madam Deputy Speaker. First is Chloe Cox, an English teacher at Ridgewood High School who bravely returned to the classroom after surviving a life-threatening brain tumour. Pupils and colleagues alike are so happy to see her back, and her resilience is inspiring. Mandy Hobbis, who campaigns tirelessly for road safety laws to protect cats, ensuring they are treated with the same respect as dogs. And as a champion for animals and the owner of 3 cats myself, I believe the work Mandy is doing is so important in helping to raise awareness and deliver parity for our pets. Kate Cook, who overcame a stroke to become a HR manager at one of our great local businesses in Brierley Hill, Amira, introducing programmes that support children and college students with opportunities of work experience and apprenticeships. Judith Morland, a leader in the arts, keeping her In Sound Company community choir alive since 2012, performing at prestigious events like Community Spirit at Birmingham Symphony Hall and the Commonwealth Games. Her dedication has fostered growth, inclusivity and perseverance, especially during lockdown. I will also be celebrating Rosemary Taylor, who is in her 80s but still goes out every day in all weathers with her little trolley picking litter all around the area. Heather Cruikshanks, who turns 80 this year, is still running a rainbow unit and helps the Guides and Trefoil Guild. She was described as an amazing woman by constituents who are so grateful for her. And let me not forget Elsie Gale, a driving force behind the APPG on black maternal health, fighting to improve maternal care in the UK. Another nominee, Emma Kilbride, is raising funds for Mary Stevens Hospice through her Stourbridge Jigsaw Library, and in just 15 months she's raised more than £26,000. Angie Burford, who is working at Atlantic House, supporting with local recovery for drugs and alcohol. And finally, last but not least, Samantha Billingham, a name I've mentioned before in this chamber, a fierce campaigner for domestic abuse survivors.
Order. Jerome Mayhew.
Speaker, this isn't my first International Women's Day debate, but each one of them is a fantastic opportunity to learn about the exceptional women that have made up our history, and to be reminded, as I need it, that many of those exceptional women are in this chamber today. My contribution for Norfolk is someone called Elizabeth Fry. I'm particularly proud of her because she also happens to be my 5 times great aunt. But Elizabeth Fry, that's as close as I get to real commitment and fame, I'm afraid. But she was, in the early 19th century, horrified by the conditions of prisons. She visited Newgate Prison, and instead of walking on by, she took action. She funded prison schools for the children who were incarcerated, along with their mothers in those days. She taught employment skills. She promoted rehabilitation as a concept, which was new at that stage. And she developed the wider movement for reform. And she, of passing interest, in 1818, she was the first woman ever to give evidence to a House of Commons inquiry. And it's directly because of her campaigning work that we have the Jails Act of 1823 and the Prisons Act of 1835. And that was the beginning of the end of the truly terrible conditions of the 18th century. But we talk now about violence against women and girls, but that's not new, because in her personal diaries, she expressly discussed the need to protect female prisoners from rape and sexual exploitation. Now, much has improved beyond recognition from those days, I recognise that, and we should celebrate it today and elsewhere. But too much does remain the same. Just in the last government, we had offences of stalking, non-fatal strangulation, coercive control, and public sexual harassment. The fact that those new legislations were needed demonstrates the failure of us corporately to change attitudes. And those were conditions which would have been familiar to Elizabeth Fry back in the 1820s. And our work isn't about legislation, because that isn't actually the solution. All that legislation does is deal and treat symptoms. The problem is the generational transfer of attitudes from, I'm sorry to say, typically from father to son. And it's our work to challenge those generational attitudes. I don't often agree with the member for Brent East, but on this I absolutely stand shoulder to shoulder with her.
I call Catherine Fuchs.
As the previous CEO of Women's Equality Network Wales, I have a long history of campaigning for women's equality, and I was really proud of the work we did there on the Diverse 50-50 campaign to get more women into public and political life and to make care fair, to recognise the huge army of unpaid women carers out there. And the theme of IWD this year is to accelerate action. And my goodness me, don't we still need more action? Yes, we now have a whopping 47% of all Welsh MPs as women, which is brilliant. But there are only 2 women leaders of Welsh local authorities. One, I'm proud to say, is Mary-Ann Brocklesby, our very own leader in Monmouthshire. One of the most difficult issues today that women face is healthcare inequality, and my inbox is full of cases. For many years, it's been underfunded, and people haven't wanted to talk about periods or the menopause. But I want to pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Neath and Swansea East, who has done such a huge amount in this area. It's thanks to her that this place has signed up to the menopause mandate, and it's thanks to her that I feel able to share today my own story. She's given me the courage to do so. My journey with the menopause was a difficult one. For me, it happened literally overnight as I had increasingly heavy and painful periods, which some days stopped me from going to work due to the heavy flow. I literally could not be more than 1 minute away from the loo. Eventually, the bleeding was so bad and unstoppable that I ended up in A&E thinking I had a hemorrhage. It was fibroids, with one as big as an orange. Later, I finally got the hysterectomy I needed, and the story ends happily. Here I am. But with that, of course, having a hysterectomy came an immediate overnight menopause, and I stupidly thought I could get through it without the help of drugs. And I refused the patches offered to me at hospital, despite being the CEO of a Women's Equality Network charity. I had not done my research. I'm so grateful to my incredible friends and the NHS who helped me understand what was going on. I am so proud of our government's bold commitment to hard violence against women. It is so important, but connected to this issue is one that's filled my inbox, which is the inefficiency and the impossible situation with the child maintenance service. It is, to my mind, unforgivable that after a woman has made the really difficult decision to leave her partner, she then can continue to be abused by her husband financially, as the CMS fails to prevent this. I would like to take a moment to thank my honourable friend, the member for Birmingham Yardley, who has inspired me over the years and done so much on violence against women. And finally, I want to highlight the talented, inspiring and wonderful women of Monmouthshire who came to my International Women's Day event in Chepstow on Saturday. It was a pleasure to be joined by so many inspiring women, and we raised £500 for Welsh Women's Aid Cyfannol.
I call Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As other speakers have referenced, International Women's Day was born out of struggles waged by past generations of women, whose efforts and sacrifices, by and large, will not be recorded in the history books, but whose actions have enabled other women to walk an easier path through life than perhaps they did. Unfortunately, the continuation of that struggle seems more pertinent now than at any time in my adult life, as there is a concerted attempt to roll back hard-won gains of the women's movement. We see this in the toxic influence of a resurgent reactionary politics, amplified via 2 loosely regulated social media platforms, enabling misogyny to literally reach into the bedrooms of our young teenage boys. I'm not just referring here to the Andrew Tates of the world. I'm also referring to the Donald Trumps of this world, who ridicule the very notion there being an unequal playing field that hinders the lives of women. Indeed, Trump and his supporters state the exact opposite. In their world, it is men, and white men in particular, who are the real victims of moves to tackle inequality. There are 2 things about this narrative that worry me. Firstly, it is getting traction in this country. A study conducted by the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's College found that nearly 1 in 2 Britons, 47%, say that when it comes to giving women equal rights with men, things have gone far enough in Great Britain. a notable increase on the 38% who said the same last year, and a stark increase in the proportion who felt this way as recently as 2019. The increase means that for the first time, Britons are now more likely than Americans to agree women's equality has gone far enough. Secondly, these views normalise misogyny and encourages violence against women and girls. They literally put women's life in danger. It is critical, therefore, for MPs to reassert the reality of institutionalised misogyny and sexism. That is something more often than not which is denied, whether in the House of Commons or the police force or the military, where instances of misogyny get reduced to some bad apples and the institutions get involved, get let off the hook. We have to more forcefully demonstrate a zero-tolerance approach to hate and abuse against women. We also need more practical measures right now to make it safer for women to live their lives free of harassment and go about their everyday lives without fear or attack. In conclusion, 2 years after the murder of Sarah Everard, it should be the least we can do in her memory and in the memory of approximately 450 women murdered by...
Katrina Murray.
Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Brent East for allowing us to do what this House does at its best, is when we speak as one and when we work together. International Women's Day is an opportunity for all of us to celebrate the achievement of women, reflect on the progress we've made, and more crucially, recommit to the work that is still to be done. And as we have been rightly reminded through this debate, there are still battles to be won, many, many battles, whether in our local communities, across the nation or globally. Women have always been at the forefront of change, often having to fight to have their voices heard. Yet they have made significant contributions and led movements for justice and equality. The fight for women's rights is a fight for economic justice, for reproductive rights and freedom from violence and discrimination. It is a fight against exploitation, against trafficking and against the silencing of women's voices. The theme for International Women's Day this year is to accelerate action, and whilst every single one of us in this place has a role to play in that, it's also necessary in our communities. Like other members, I want to take a moment to share the stories and celebrate the achievements of some really spectacular women in my constituency. However, not a single one of them would say that they were spectacular. Not a single one of them would say that they're doing something above and beyond. Women like Lavinia McElhinney, the ladies' president at Woodley Bowling Club, who I met at the club's fundraising coffee morning last year, because women's sport like bowling is just as important as that on the telly. Or Louise Carberry, a Primary 7 pupil at Kilsyth Primary School, whose app designing skills saw her win the Make It Happen Club App Design Challenge. Her Save the Whale idea was not only recognised, but developed into reality, yet another woman into STEM. Or RSC, the engineering company in my constituency, who's overwhelmingly recruiting graduate women engineers in the water industry, and the inspiring women of Kilsyth and Steps Guiding. OK, I must admit I'm biased. I was a guide, I was a brownie, and an occasional adult volunteer. But young women, these volunteers are bringing those young women forward. Our fight is not finished. The battle for equality continues everywhere. So let's recommit ourselves to not only celebrating progress, but to truly accelerate action.
I call Tom Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As I grow older, I find myself becoming more and more intensely aware of the injustices that confront women and girls every day in the UK. I'd like to cover a few points, beginning with health. It's alarming to note that NICE recognises that up to 9 out of 10 women suffer from period pain, 3 out of 10 of them severely, and up to 3 in 8 adolescent girls and women face heavy periods, with 1 in 20 women in their 30s and 40s taking the difficult step to consult their GP each year because of heavy periods or menstrual problems. These issues are very common, but we should not accept them as normal. I really welcome the comments from the member for Luton North, my honourable friend, on those. Yeah. But it's equally alarming to recognise the error bands in those statistics. They are huge, with the upper limits being 5 and 10 times the lower limit values for those two stats I opened with. We simply don't know enough about these conditions. We have a deficit of research, a deficit of knowledge, and a deficit of clinical solutions. Yeah. And we need to do more, and these issues are the lived experiences of women, but they're the responsibility of us all. I'd like to talk then about an issue that sits primarily with men. I have listened to the stories of men in my constituency in Worcester talking about the impact that pornography has had on their mental health, their relationships, and by extension, the women in their lives. Pornography is wildly addictive, it is harmful to men, and it is hazardous to women. And now in a world where it's industrially available and increasingly violent, and it's silently fueling sexual violence and exploitation. I would like us to move rapidly to implement regulation and enforcement that is fierce, fast and forceful to make our country safe. I would like to raise a local issue in my constituency of Worcester. It's very urgent and very important. The Dawn Project supports survivors of domestic violence in Worcestershire. I've heard firsthand the stories of survivors who have found their lives transformed by the service. It's saving lives and it's restoring futures, but it's at risk as funding streams are drying up. Local people in Worcester are digging deep and trying to crowdfund money to support the charity in the meantime. But I'd be very grateful if the Minister would meet with me to discuss ways that we can secure the future of the Dawn Project in Worcester. Thank you.
I call Alex McIntyre.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, can I thank the honourable member for Brent East, my honourable friend, for bringing this important debate. And it's so vital that we honour International Women's Day today, not only to recognise the remarkable achievements of women in my city of Gloucester and across the country, but to also accelerate the drive for equality that is still so desperately needed. Sadly, far too many women come to my surgeries with harrowing experiences of discrimination in the workplace, inequalities within the healthcare system, and violence and domestic abuse at home. Many are deeply concerned about the alarming rise in violence, and sadly last year we saw sexual and domestic abuse and violence reach record levels in Gloucester. On that latter point, I am proud to have presented my 10-minute rule bill earlier this year, which seeks to provide victims and survivors of domestic abuse with the right to access 10 days of paid safe leave. And I've had the privilege of working with employers and organisations such as the Holly Gazzard Trust, Women's Aid, Fear Free, Safe Lives and GDAS to develop this bill. We know that 1 in 4 women will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime, meaning that this bill will help so many women rebuild their lives, and I would encourage the government to add this to their mission. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is to accelerate action. I am encouraged by the government's commitment to do just that. We've committed to an ambitious plan to halve violence against women and girls, introducing Reneem's Law, protecting victims of stalking, domestic abuse and harassment, as well as criminalising spiking, improving healthcare and maternity services, particularly for women of colour, by closing the racial mortality gap, and tackling sex-based discrimination at work, supporting women during maternity and the menopause, and closing the gender pay gap. And I'd like to take this moment to celebrate some of the inspirational women in my city, like the fantastic Gloucester Harpreet women's rugby team who go for their 3rd successive title next Sunday, like my good friend Mary Smith, the only female leader of Gloucester City Council in the last 30 years, like Carol Francis, the first black female councillor in Gloucester who continues to champion her community, like Safira Karim, who, as the Member of Youth Parliament for Gloucester and Forest of Dean, gave a brilliant speech in this House just last week, like Julie Kent, who founded the charity Emily's Gift and will soon become High Sheriff. Earlier this year, we lost Baroness Sally Oppenheim-Barnes, who died in January after years of service to our city. And we also thank other inspirational women for their service to Gloucester and the wider county as they stepped down this year, like Sally Bing at the Barnwood Trust, Anne Whitworth at the Gloucester Law Centre, Sue Cunningham at GL Communities and Mary Hutton at Gloucestershire ICB. I'd like to echo the member for Bridgewater's comments about the Nelson Trust, who do brilliant work in my constituency. I will continue to use my position in this House to celebrate the successes of women in Gloucester, but also to advocate for a brighter future for women, which I hope we can all agree will lead to a brighter future for Gloucester and our country. Thank you.
Dr Marie Tidball.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The first time I saw the Alison Lapper pregnant sculpture in Trafalgar Square, it took my breath away. The swollen belly of Lapper spoke of a body which was loved and carried life. It said, I exist, bodies like mine exist, and therein there is beauty. We shall no longer be invisible. However, unlike non-disabled women, our experiences of pregnancy have not been celebrated nor discussed. When I found out I was pregnant in 2017, I was filled with joy and a deep connection to my body and unborn child. Growing up, the absence of disabled women's representation in discussions on sexuality, relationships, menstruation, menopause and maternity left me feeling that my womanhood did not count, that it was vitiated by my visible physical disability. By contrast, when I was pregnant, my body was no longer just a topic of medical scrutiny, my womanhood no longer invisible. I wanted my maternity to be embraced by a healthcare system that supported me in my journey. But that was not my reality. Instead, this system was unprepared for a body like mine. Early on, I was triaged to a genetic counselling service. I was left feeling devastated. As my pregnancy progressed, there was no specialist midwifery teams, and the lack of awareness of the interaction between my disability and maternity continued. I had to be induced at 37 weeks, leading to a caesarean section. My core muscles were severely impacted. I was left debilitated. After birth, the ensuite room I was put in was inaccessible. The very space that was meant to aid my recovery became another barrier. Upon discharge, the occupational therapy team had no specialist advice on how I could breastfeed outside my home, nor carry my baby. I became increasingly dependent on family members. I was exhausted and lost my confidence. Not because of anything I'd done, but because of the structures that were meant to support me did not know how to do so. My experience came 8 years after the UN Committee on the Rights of Disabled People raised concerns that the UK had failed to mainstream disabled women's rights into healthcare. This week, the London School of Tropical Medicine has published a report which demonstrates disabled women are more likely to experience stillbirth, have lower rates of breastfeeding and endure longer postnatal hospital stays. I will give way.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. She's making an incredibly powerful speech. Does she agree with me, alongside the Honourable Member for Clapham and Brixton Hill, that health services for women of colour are also lagging very, very far behind?
I certainly do agree and would want to ensure that our health services take a more intersectional approach. Indeed, UK maternity policy continues to overlook women's needs. Now it's time for action. Disabled women should experience high-quality, inclusive maternity care. We need joined-up, meaningful, inclusive maternity care pathways throughout pregnancy, birth and the postnatal period to improve access, experience and outcomes for disabled women. Crucially, there must be nothing about us without us. Disabled women must be central in improving maternity care services. And whilst I met some wonderful clinicians, we must increase their understanding through better training and update clinical guidelines to secure appropriate care. Finally, we must ensure healthcare facilities, equipment and information are accessible and that reasonable adjustments to maternity wards enable disabled women to recover from birth with dignity.
Sarah Russell.
Thank you, and thank you to my honourable friend, the member for Penistone Stockbridge, for that incredibly powerful speech, and to all the women who I've heard speak today, and who have formed such a supportive group as we've been here as new MPs. But the people I primarily want to say thank you to today are the women who look after my children, and all of the women who look after all of our children. And of course, childcare is not solely the provenance of women, but actually the majority, overwhelming majority, of the childcare workforce in this country is women. This is some of the most undervalued work in our society. It's often paid at minimum wage, and without it, other parents cannot work. And I know that nursery providers are currently deeply concerned. Labour is putting £1.8 billion into the early years, and we want 75% of children to be school ready. These are ambitious targets, and I'm proud of them. But the people who deliver this work are our childminders and our nursery staff. Childcare is key national infrastructure. We need a stable workforce and a well-trained workforce. There's a risk that if we do not fund early years and childcare well enough, the only businesses that will survive in this sector will be private equity-backed major chain nurseries. They are the ones who can manage economies of scale which will enable them to thrive in most environments. There is nothing wrong with these nurseries, and I do not wish to be suggesting that the staff within them are anything but committed or that their owners are anything other than working for the greater good. But what I don't want to see is small, passionate, women-owned businesses squeezed out of the sector, and I am concerned about that. Partly because that's the kind of childcare I had for my children in the early years, and so that's what I want for all children as an option. But partly because in Australia, when the ABC nursery chain went bust, 19,000 families woke up without childcare overnight. And I guarantee that it was predominantly women who didn't go to work the next day, and not those children's fathers. So a consolidated sector is inherently a fragile one. So I hope that in the upcoming spending review, we will look at the rates that we pay for 3- and 4-year-old childcare, as I understand that that is some of what is causing concern. And that we will also make sure that our breakfast club places are for as long as we can possibly manage, and that they are well funded, so that uptake is as we all need it to be, 100%. So I want to say thank you to all the women who have inspired me in this chamber and beyond, all the women who have helped me, but most of all I want to say thank you to the women who looked after me and the women who look after my children.
I call Liam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I also thank the Right Honourable Member for Brent East, an incredible activist for women. Firstly, I cannot express what an honour it is to speak in this debate today. My number is 567 and it's the honour of my life to have it. This year's theme, Accelerate Action, could not be more relevant. My constituency of Stafford, Eccleshall and the Villages has a proud history of women taking action against misogyny and against inequality, and today I want to honour that legacy, whilst also shining a light on the challenges we still face. One of the most remarkable women from Stafford's history is Alice Hawkins, a suffragette who worked in the Stafford shoe industry before moving to Leicester, where she became a key figure in the fight for women's right to vote. Alice lived on Red Lion Street, and her activism reminds us that change happens when ordinary working-class women take extraordinary action. And we owe it to Alice and the generations before us to continue that fight for equality today. However, while there is much to be proud of, there are areas where we must act with urgency. The statistics on violence against women and girls are shocking. Women are 3 times more likely to be killed by a partner than by not wearing a seatbelt. That is the reality that we're dealing with. In Staffordshire, the situation is dire. In the last 5 years, Staffordshire Women's Aid, which is based in my constituency, has seen a 361% increase in referrals to their sexual violence services, and an 851% increase in referrals to their specialist counselling services. Despite working in the women and girls sector for years, when I heard those figures, I was devastated. Violence against women and girls is happening in every corner of this country, and I firmly believe that it's a national emergency. In my own casework, I continue to see women, many with children, who are forced to flee their homes and start over again because of domestic abuse. Time and time again, it's the women and children having to uproot their lives while the perpetrators face far fewer consequences. When I stood for election last year, I was so proud to be a member of a party that has promised to halve violence against women and girls in the next decade. But we must go further. I'd like to thank the Minister who notified me in advance that she'll be later naming my constituent, Rebecca Simpkin, who was murdered in July last year. I'll be following this closely, and I want to express how grateful I am to the Minister, both as a Member of Parliament, as a woman, for the tireless work she's done in this space. So, for someone from this space, you're a very inspiring woman. From Alice Hawkins' fight for the vote, for women in my constituency striving for equality today, our mission remains the same: to build a society where women can live free from fear and reach their full potential.
All Rosa Writing.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I rise today as the youngest woman in Parliament and the first woman to represent my constituency of Kettering. I was also raised by women, my mum, my nan and my aunt Emma. I am proudly a Gen Z woman. Like many others my age, I grew up on social media. I watched this series of Love Island. This weekend I'm going to see Sabrina Carpenter, and I'm still shocked about Molly May and Tommy Fury's breakup. But absolutely none of that takes away from my ability to serve my constituents. Madam Deputy Speaker, being a young woman in this place has its pitfalls, and I know that women MPs bear the brunt of online abuse, making ourselves read daily online comments which criticise our appearance, question our intelligence and threaten our safety. In a post when the election was called last year, more people asked me if I had an OnlyFans account than about our manifesto pledges.
Disgraceful.
Online, I am called Barbie. I'm a stupid girl and a child playing politics, and many more creative things that I can't say in this house. I know many great women who haven't stood for Parliament because of online abuse or worrying about their safety, and this House is worse off because of it. My message for women who are thinking about getting into politics is that there's a place for you here, and we need you.
Will the Honourable Member give way?
Yes, absolutely.
Does she agree with me that she is a phenomenal role model herself as a woman with a great knowledge of business, and sitting on the Business and Trade Select Committee brings a special expertise, having worked herself in the fashion industry?
I thank my honourable friend for those really kind comments. But the things I see on my screen also translate to real life. And when I walk back to my flat tonight, I won't have my headphones on, so I can hear if someone is following me. And when I go out with my friends, I won't put my drink down because I'm worried I might be spiked. And when a man asks for my number on the tube, all I'm thinking is how I can let him down gently because I'm worried how he might take it if I say no.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I'd just like to remark it in support of her observations about the experience of being a female Member of Parliament, that when we were advised about security as candidates by this place, the advice that we got from a bunch of white men, we kind of looked at each other, us female candidates, and observed that almost everything they were suggesting that we did, walk in the light, don't have your headphones on, be careful where you stand on a platform, were basically the advice we had been given by our mothers at the age of 12.
Yes, I absolutely do agree, and coming into this place, it's sad to say that that advice wasn't new to us, and it is sadly things that we've had to learn just through our own experiences. And I also want to put on record my admiration for colleagues across this House from ethnic minority backgrounds, the LGBTQ+ community, and female members who have disabilities, because they fight a fight I can't even imagine. I am surrounded, though, by many, many great male colleagues in this place, and I know that we cannot accelerate action, uplift or empower young women without also engaging young men. We have to be clear, we cannot tackle violence against women and girls without supporting young men at this vital point. My constituency is not unique to having women in our community who've been killed by a family member or partner. And I want to take a moment to mention the horrific case of Andrew Assock, who was a well-loved nurse in Kettering, and she was killed alongside her 2 children in December 2022 by her husband. Andrew went to work every day to look after others and support our vital public services. But when she needed support the most, she was let down. But we have so much more to do to make women feel safe at work, walking down the street, and even in our own homes. And I know members across this House will continue to work together to make sure that we can accelerate that action.
Annalise Midgley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Every year, over 1.6 million women in this country experience domestic abuse. And in my own constituency of Knowsley, we have recently had the highest rate of femicide. I'm determined to do everything I can in my power to keep women safe in my constituency. Madam Deputy Speaker, Paula Leather was from Knowsley, and in her family's words, Paula was beautiful inside and out, so kind, so loving, and she was the person that was there for everyone. She worked at the Asda, and was the mum of Jason, Jessica and Matthew, and the proudest nanny for her first grandson. But Paula's husband barbarically murdered Paula in their home, stabbing her up to 300 times. And behind each statistic we cite are real lives like Stephanie Owen, Sharon Hayter, Teresa Wishart, Valerie Turner, Magdalena Palcutt, Lorraine Cullen, Karen Dempsey and Courtney Boom, all women from Knowsley, killed by male violence against women, some murdered by their own sons. 1 in 10 women killed by men are killed by their own sons. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to turn to the urgent issue of funding for specialist domestic abuse services. For many survivors, these are a lifeline, but the fact is they're struggling financially. They're stretched, underfunded, and in some cases shutting doors. We can't accept this. Many survivors are more likely to turn to them and have more trust than they do in the state and the police. So these services must be at the heart of this government's mission to halve violence against women and girls. We've got to put our money where our mouth is. Madam Deputy Speaker, the first step, the only independent specialist domestic abuse service in Knowsley, literally saves lives. And I want to commend the Chief Executive, Carolyn Grant, and her team for what they do for Knowsley. She's up there. Yet they are being forced to turn women away because the stability of funding just isn't there. And that's why I've written to my honourable friend, the Victims Minister, to ask that this sustainable multi-year funding is committed to specialist domestic abuse services, including the first step in Knowsley. I welcome Raheem's Law and everything that this government is doing on this urgent matter. We've made incredible progress and have great ambition for women, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend who's on our front bench today for all her work. But no funding was pledged for domestic abuse in the last budget, and I very much hope that that changes in the spring statement.
Chris MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Brent East, for moving this motion. We've just heard from the last two speakers, my honourable friends, the members for Kettering and Knowsley, some incredibly powerful testimony. But if members will forgive me, I intend to shift the tone slightly and talk about a moment of joy that I experienced yesterday. But first, I also want to acknowledge the proud achievements of our Labour Party in advancing the cause of women over the last century, and pay particular tribute to the members of the women's sections in our labour and trade union movement for the work that they do in their local communities. So yesterday, I had a lovely visit to our marvellous education centre from the students of St Joseph's Catholic Church Primary School in Billingham in my constituency. And as always, I was asked the best and hardest questions by the students there. And one of the questions I was asked are, what are MPs going to do to help women who play football have the same level of pay as men who play football? What a great question that is. And in fact, we've heard a bit about women's sport today, and we are seeing real rapid growth and transformation of football for women and girls. We've heard about the Lioness effect. And we've seen the England team have been fantastic role models and have achieved absolutely on the main stage at Wembley under floodlights, really putting their critics to rest. But we shouldn't forget what they've been up against. The Football Association today have got ambitious targets to grow the girls' game. But on the 5th of December 1921, the FA met at its headquarters in London and announced a ban on the women's game. They said the game of football is quite unsuitable for females and ought not to be encouraged. Well, before that, there were 150 women's football clubs attracting 45,000 fans to their games. You do have to wonder if the FA were more motivated by how the women's game was taking fans away from the men's game. And I think if you'd asked women before that ban, they would have said there was a bright future for the women's game. Well, there certainly is now, because since that ban was reversed in 1971, the women's game has gone on from strength to strength, and I would like to commend the Football Association for the work that they've done to improve access and opportunities for women and girls. And tomorrow, to celebrate International Women's Day, I will be joining the Bewley Primary School, also in Billingham, to watch a training session and a football match run by the Hartlepool Football Foundation. The Let Girls Play biggest ever football session, I think, sends a very strong message to girls growing up today that they can look forward to the same success and achievement in our national game as boys. And I'd like to close by saying it is incredibly inspiring for me to work with such brave, talented, dedicated and hard-working women in Parliament, including everyone who is speaking in the debate today. Our women members are wonderful role models. Thank you.
I call Tonya Antoniazzi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Ahead of International Women's Day, we have got to remember that violence against women and girls is not inevitable. Men who kill, men who rape, men who abuse and sexually harass do so in the context of entrenched sex discrimination that normalises male predatory behaviour and quickly blames victims. But with sufficient will then, and that context being changed, it can and it must be ended. And this is why the most welcome change since the last year's International Women's Day is that we now have a Labour government. Yeah. As chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Commercial Sexual Exploitation, I have a particular interest in prostitution, and it's one that I want to highlight today. The Femicide Census, whose authors are here today, Clary and Karen, is harrowing. It is nonetheless a groundbreaking report, and its latest edition was published yesterday. And it looks in detail at the first it looks at detail of 2,000 completed cases of women killed by men on their database. 2,000 women, Madam Deputy Speaker, is 2,000 too many. 45 of the women killed were identified as being involved or having been involved in prostitution, as women were only included in this cohort if their involvement in prostitution had been explicitly mentioned in either official documents or the media. And so that is likely to be a huge undercount. The research found that this cohort of women killed by men in the UK have been involved in prostitution tend to be younger and less likely to be born in the UK than any other women killed by men. The data shows that women involved in prostitution are also the most vulnerable in society. A Home Office report noted that approximately 50% of women in prostitution in the UK started being paid for sex acts before they were 18 years old, while up to 95% of women in street prostitution are believed to be problematic drug users. They are the most vulnerable. And it is not a job, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is not work. No. They are disproportionately victims of violence, including fatal violence. In their death, they are more likely to be subjected to sexual violence, and after their death, their bodies are more likely to be desecrated. This is not a coincidence. Prostitution is the oldest form of sexual exploitation, a form of violence against women and girls. It is another manifestation of sexual inequality.
Will she give way?
I will, yeah.
Does the honourable member agree with me that it's so positive this week that our government has announced that young girls will no longer be placed in young offender institutions?
I think, thank her for her intervention, because that is fantastic, and it goes to show at the heart of what our ministers and our cabinet members are doing to support women and girls. But all in all, Madam Deputy Speaker, women and girls matter, including those that are exploited in the sex trade, whom I would like to dedicate my remarks to today.
I call Alison Hume.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for calling me to make a contribution to this debate on International Women's Day. I'm proud to be the first woman to represent my constituency of Scarborough and Whitby. In my acceptance speech, I pledged to play my part in ending the epidemic of violence against women and girls and to see the very first women's refuge built in North Yorkshire. Today, I rise to pay tribute to a constituent who has spent a lifetime overcoming what happened to her as a young girl to become an outspoken survivor and advocate for victims of child sexual abuse. When I say a lifetime, I mean a lifetime. Abused at 10, Suzanne buried what had happened to her to build a successful career and raise a family. She told me that it was only once her children had grown up and left home that she felt able to deal with what had happened to her. At 48, she went to the police, and at 50, after a very traumatic and drawn-out investigation and trial, the perpetrator was sentenced to 13 years. As such, perpetrators only serve half of this time in prison, and he is due to be released in the summer. As a childminder and early years inspector, Susanna loves where she lives. Of course she does, it's her home. But as she waits for the decision of the parole board, she's planning to sell her home, because when her abuser is released, he will move back to his family home a few streets away from her, in a house she has to walk past to reach her parents' home. The man who abused my constituent as a child will live literally 2 streets away from her, a 3-minute walk away from her home, a mere 322 metres away and visible from her upstairs rooms. Understandably, she can't face the thought of coming face to face with her abuser. Suzanne told me that she was very fortunate to have been signposted to IDAS, a specialist charity supporting victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence, and without their support, she would have taken her own life. Madam Deputy Speaker, I ask why a man who has abused a child in their close neighbourhood should be allowed to return to live just a few streets away. It goes beyond whether perpetrators are seen as a risk. It continues the suffering of women and girls who have suffered abuse. I'm sure there are no easy answers, but I'd like to pay tribute to Suzanne today for allowing me to share her story. I'd like to thank her for her courage. Madam Deputy Speaker, we want women to feel safe on the streets and in our homes, and that includes survivors like Suzanne.
Yeah. Before I call the next speaker, I will be beginning front bench speeches at 3:15, and we have 6 people left hoping to speak. Jane Kirkham.
Madam Deputy Speaker, much like the members for Stourbridge, I'm here as the 5th woman in a row to represent Falmouth as part of my constituency. The first in Falmouth in '97 was selected by all-woman shortlist. It's 50 years since Barbara Castle introduced the Equal Pay Bill to the House of Commons. She was a pioneering woman, obviously, the first Secretary of State for Employment. She supported the strike of the Ford factory workers in Dagenham, which paved the way for that equal pay legislation in 1975. However, it wasn't until '84 that those female Ford factory workers received full skills recognition in line with the men. And just last year, in 2024, the Fawcett Society reported that the mean gender pay gap for full-time workers is still 11.3%. Decades later, we still have a long way to go. It's harder to get equal paid work even before having children, and afterwards it's even harder. So I'm pleased that this Labour government is bringing in measures that will help us get there, things like flexible working and better childcare provision. Our expansion of free childcare and universal breakfast clubs for primary school children will relieve some of that pressure on working parents, let's be honest, mothers, who still often carry far more of that mental load. When my son was small and I became a single mum, my income suddenly dropped exponentially. I'd left a job in the city to move to Cornwall and start our family. I found a job that fitted in with school hours, but those jobs, despite being vital, are often low paid and less secure. So improving childcare in this country and making it more important is crucial to eliminating that gender pay gap. The Employment Rights Bill, introduced to this House in October, has many provisions in it that will help. Flexible working will become the default where practical, and it will be harder for employers to refuse flexible working requests. This will allow women with caring responsibilities more easily to balance them with work. It will also benefit women suffering from health conditions such as endometriosis, who will be able to manage their symptoms and appointments. I've met with a number of constituents with endometriosis who've shared stories of their chronic pain and multiple surgeries making it difficult for them to work. They also struggle to feel heard and supported by the medical profession, feeling they have to fight for treatment, sometimes waiting years for diagnosis, as has been pointed out. Companies with more than 250 employees will be required to create action plans addressing gender equality, including menopause. I know myself from bitter experience that migraines, sleeplessness and hot flushes can be debilitating, as can basic words dropping out of my head. Having arrangements and understanding in place will enable more women to keep working. Skilled social care workers are chronically underpaid for what they do, and the job I found as a single mum and retrained for was a teaching assistant. Working in a school in a supporting role is another sector where the pay is very low, and I'm very pleased that the bill gives respect and recognition for social care workers and support staff in the school support negotiating body and the fair pay agreement.
And whistle.
Thank
Deputy Speaker, and can I add my thanks to my honourable friend, the member for Brent East, for bringing this debate to the House. I'm especially proud to speak in this debate as a member on the Women and Equalities Select Committee. I'm also the first woman to represent my constituency of Bolsover North East, and frankly, I think there are far too many of us first women representing our constituency, so hope that changes. On Monday, I was proud to host a coffee morning in aid of Fort Alice, who provide refuge accommodation, wraparound support, one-to-one sessions for women and children to work through their trauma, and an outstanding nursery on site to help kids smile, and providing a lifeline for victims and survivors of domestic abuse. I also hosted 2 further events on Tuesday and spoke proudly about Endeavour, who are the UK's first domestic abuse service who provide a pet fostering service, and they recognise that women facing domestic abuse also feel trapped because they don't want to leave a pet behind, which removes a huge barrier to finding help. But today is also a day for honesty, like we've heard from so many wonderful contributions to this debate so far. It is a dangerous time. We're seeing women's rights being rolled back across the globe. We face stark reality. Amazing work is being done by so many women, and having followed her career so closely, I'm honoured to be in this place with the member for Birmingham Yardley and reassured to have her on our front benches. We have a long way to go in this country. Women must fight for everything in society. We have to keep working together to fight for and protect women and girls. We are still fighting for equal pay. We are still fighting for safety on our streets, in our homes, and now also in the digital world, we're seeing abuse and violence against women and girls taking on new forms as technology evolves. We've seen the creation of deepfakes, non-consensual image-based abuse, online harassment, and let's not forget that social media platforms, those that shape our conversations, our culture, and sometimes even our self-worth, are owned and controlled by men. Yes, it's true, women have more opportunities. We are able to work, we're able to go out and earn our own wage and have our independence, but the expectations placed on us remain. We still carry the mental load. We are still primary caregivers. We are still in charge of household chores, managing childcare. So we have to keep fighting, working and demanding better. We tell young girls that they can be anything, that they can have it all, but we do not tell young boys the same about making sure that they take on their share of the housework, they manage the household, they become good parents. This must change, because we cannot create a safer, fairer world for women and girls without working with men and boys.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the Honourable Member from Brent East for bringing this debate, and all Honourable Members who have contributed today, but particularly to the Penistone and Stockbridge member whose experience in maternity service is shocking but sadly not unique, and an experience I hope we can together eradicate. Madam Deputy Speaker, today on International Women's Day we celebrate the achievements, resilience and contribution of women and girls across our community. And what better way to honour this day than by shining a light on a place in my constituency that welcomes new life into the world and champions the health and well-being of mothers, the Ports of Hospitals University NHS Trust Maternity Services team, including a fantastic all-female team at Queen Alexandra Hospital. In the past year alone, this remarkable unit has delivered 5,000 babies, and a dedication 24/7, 365 days a year midwives goes far beyond the delivery room. And I'd like to highlight some of the trailblazing initiatives that help make life for parents and babies easier and safer. A new care pathway has been developed by the Trust team and Ports of Down Syndrome Association to provide additional support and information for all families who are expecting a baby with Down syndrome. It includes appointments with specialist midwives, a paediatrician including feeding specialists, additional specialist scans, and an offer of an induction of 39 weeks. A new partnership also allows babies to be registered in the hospital. This service supports new parents through the registration process and takes only 10 to 15 minutes, enabling them to get a head start on applying for important documents such as their birth certificates and taking the pressure off, and also allowing all parents to get the support and be treated equally as new parents, whatever their background. Thanks to the introduction of the life-saving neonatal bedside resuscitation units, even the tiniest and most vulnerable newborn babies have the best chance of a healthy start. with babies born at 24 weeks having a fantastic 80% survival rate, when the national is 18. The Trust's dedication has earned them a place among the finalists in the NHS Parliamentary Awards, providing their hard work is not just felt in Portsmouth, but nationwide. I was proud to go along and meet the team at the ceremony, where they were shortlisted for the Nursing and Midwifery Award and the Future of the NHS Award, and I'm looking forward to going to the unit. Finally, this trust has been awarded the prestigious UNICEF Baby Friendly Award and is the latest UK healthcare facility to be awarded this. International Women's Day is about celebrating progress, and the Queen Alexandra Hospital unit is a great example. I am proud to be Women MP number 686 and be able to celebrate the women in my constituency, of which there are many. And I am proud that the women in my constituency have a dedicated team to support them through childbirth. 281 midwives, 101 maternity support workers and countless students. And to them, I say thank you.
Yeah. I call Polly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last Saturday, women from across East Thanet came together at a conference about tackling violence against women and girls. They gave their testimony on what they most want to see improved. Public services, particularly mental health provision, quality of policing, lack of reliable, affordable, safe public transport and safety in the workplace and in the streets were all brought up time and time again. Yes, certainly.
Women are overrepresented in informal and vulnerable employment. Does the member agree that the protections afforded in the Employment Rights Bill are really important for these women?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. It is indeed true, and it was powerful to see people talking about the strength of increased representation in the workplace by trade unions, giving them greater protections as well. But again, housing, housing and housing. I know my honourable friend on the front bench will recognise that this is key for the kind of security and safety that people, the women in particular, require. We spend a lot of time in International Women's Day talking about the importance of opportunity because it has been restricted over centuries, and we celebrate the smashing of glass ceilings every day. Whether it is because of legislation or lack of rights or culture, women's access to opportunity has been limited. I give the House a particular example, though, that was raised at that conference by Oasis, our local domestic abuse service. They pointed out that because we have a particularly high level of youth unemployment, about 10% in Thanet, we have a high level of young people not in education, employment and training. We have young women being encouraged, meaning forced, by their boyfriends, meaning soon-to-be pimps, to set up their own OnlyFans account in order to be able to secure income. We also need to remember that that is exactly why we need the security and confidence in the law in order to be able to make sure that we are all safe. Security in the home, security in the community, security for our country. It is violence against women and girls, that Violence Against Women and Girls conference I hosted brought those issues to the surface. And given the increasingly unsafe and unpredictable world in which we live, this is becoming only more important. So it's in this context that I pay tribute to the government and their commitment to increasing spending on the defence of our country, because security and safety is just not personal, it is also based in the community and our country. We need to acknowledge the crucial role of aid, however, in increasing security here and abroad, including for women at home in the UK and elsewhere. For women across the globe, international aid has been a lifeline for them. It has given them both the security and access to opportunities that they otherwise would likely not have. I understand that we are having to make difficult decisions, and I absolutely support increasing defence spending. I am simply reminding the House of the role and impact that international aid has on women across the globe. We know that 30% of the people who come across the Channel on small boats are women and children. Aid can reduce that. If those women have security and opportunity at home, why would they take that dangerous journey? I finish, Madam Deputy Speaker, again in my constituency. Claire Knight would have been my constituent if she had lived, but instead she was killed while walking her dog on the beach in Minnis Bay in August 2023. Last week, her killer was was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison. But it is important to know that he escaped arrest the day before for upskirting. We will hear the names of the women who have been killed at the hands of men this year from my honourable friend on the front bench. Making those women visible is important. It is part of the struggle to eradicate this violence and hatred of women.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. There have been many powerful contributions by honourable members across the House this afternoon, and my contribution won't focus on abuse or violence or intimidation or even health issues. Instead, I would like to speak a little bit about domestic equality and fairness. It is an incontrovertible fact that women have been discriminated against by men for centuries. The historical struggle for equality and fairness women have had and continue to have is incredible. For example, it taking until 1928 for women to receive equal voting rights as men is astounding. And it is wrong that it took until 1970 in the Equal Pay Act to make equal pay compulsory between male and female employees. Madam Deputy Speaker, on that particular issue of pay, I'd like to thank my honourable friend from Brent East for securing this debate today, and also a Westminster Hall debate on pay gaps just a few weeks ago. Because in the Scottish context, this is a very current issue. The Scottish Trade Union Congress have shown that women in Scotland can expect to see themselves earn an incredible £3,000 a year less than men. And in Scotland, the gender pay gap has risen from 6.4% in 2023 to 8.3% in 2024. This is unfairness in action and shows that the fight is very much ongoing because workplace gender inequality is still tolerated in modern society. And Madam Deputy Speaker, now that we are in government, we would do well to heed the political power of women, especially those born in the 1950s, because their discontent at pension inequality has become a national movement. Now that we have the power that could correct that injustice suffered by WASPy women, we really should deliver on what is right and deserved. Credit to the WASPy women. They continue to fight against the injustice they are victims of. WASPy women are not going away. Theirs is a movement based on the values of fighting against discrimination and inequality, a struggle women know so well. And us on this side of the House as socialists, and especially my female comrades, know that power concedes nothing without demand. It never has and it never will.
I call the final speaker from the backbenches with just a very short speech, the Shahaba Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is a pleasure to be speaking on this International Women's Day debate as the first female MP for Gillingham and Raynham. I'm surrounded by so many hard-working and driven women from across the House. Politics, regardless of the party you represent, has always been a vehicle through which gender stereotypes are smashed, barriers to entry are pulled down, and which trailblazers are forged. But despite the progress made in our politics, there is still work to do, as my honourable friend from Kettering has so eloquently outlined. And the underrepresentation of women in certain industries unfortunately extends beyond Westminster. It has real implications for our society and indeed our economic prosperity as a nation. Take construction. The ONS reported that as of 2023, only 15% of the construction workforce was female. And when I visit Mid-Kent College, which serves my constituents, I'm inspired by the young women who are passionate about entering the industry. But the reality that they face is they will be entering a sector with low female representation across the board and systemic barriers to career progress. And then our armed forces and the defence sector, which are vital components of the government strategy to deliver economic growth and national security. It is therefore critical that women can look to the military with confidence for their own careers. Yet we still hear stories of those in the military facing misogyny, harassment and bullying, and even cases of one woman who faced sexual harassment and took her own life. The need to recruit and ensure women stay in our forces is a challenge for our society and indeed our government. Looking back to our history, there are lessons we can learn from the important efforts of female service personnel who were pivotal to the British war efforts in World War I, World War II and many subsequent conflicts. Indeed, one of Medway's key cultural assets is a reminder of such triumphs. HMS Cavalier was solely built by women in only 9 months in 1944. I don't know what that says about 9 months. Our investment in our national security needs to ensure that we have accessible pathways for women to join our armed forces, but also, importantly, stay there, fulfil their potential and keep Britain safe as they always have done. Now, I do recognise that across all these sectors, significant work has been undertaken to address inequality, but there is a battle to fight outdated gender stereotypes which are imposed from a young age and go on to have lasting consequences. Britain has always been at its best when women are given the opportunities to excel in their chosen pursuits. On International Women's Day and its theme of accelerated action, I remind this House of its obligations to enable women across the UK to pursue the occupations they are passionate about and create new pathways so they can realise their ambitions.
We now start with the front bench speeches, and I call Liberal Democrat spokesperson Alex Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Ahead of International Women's Day this Saturday, I want to celebrate women's achievements, starting by congratulating the Honourable Member for Brent East for bringing this important debate today, for being a trailblazer in this Parliament's diversity and for speaking so passionately. We have made the most amazing progress since the inaugural International Women's Day, following workers' rights protests in the early 20th century. Women in this country can now vote, start a business and undergo surgery on their own bodies without consulting a man. The absence of these rights might feel faintly ridiculous now, but they were hard-won in our relatively recent past, and we must remember they don't apply universally across the world. We must also recognise that while so much progress has been made, given the current global political environment, this progress has never felt so precarious. This year marks 250 years since Jane Austen's birth in our beautiful Hampshire countryside. Austen's novels, despite high praise and popularity, were published anonymously, and it was her brother who often dealt with her publishing negotiations. One of her first books was simply written under the authorship by a lady. As we celebrate World Book Day today as well, it's a perfect opportunity to reflect on the enduring impact of authors like Austen, who not only shaped our literary world, but also challenged the societal norms in their time. Women's literature in the UK, thankfully, is no longer published anonymously, but we still live in a world where 122 million girls are out of school. 496 million adult women worldwide cannot read or write, and women make up 2/3 of the global illiterate population. Issues of education and illiteracy will be worsened by the recent announced cuts to international aid. These policies, as highlighted by the Honourable Member for East Thanet, disproportionately harm women. We need foreign policy with gender equality at its heart, not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because countries which educate girls do better economically for everyone. We must also increase international development funding initiatives which aim to eradicate sexual violence and abuse in areas of conflict. The UN confirmed a 50% rise in conflict-related sexual violence between 2022 and 2023. Women and girls made up 95% of the victims. It's not just sexual violence. 61% of preventable maternal mortality occurred in 35 crisis-affected countries. That amounts to around 500 deaths per day, and the average incidence of child marriage was 14.4% higher in conflict-affected countries than in non-conflict settings. Women continue to be abused across the world. Murder is still the leading cause of premature death of women, and we have heard that every 10 minutes a woman or girl is murdered by her intimate partner or family member. We also heard powerful testimony from the Honourable Member for Bolsover on rape and sexual assault. And we must develop our mechanisms of support by embedding domestic abuse specialists in every police force, increasing protections for refugees and expanding our rape crisis centres to tackle these crises. In this Parliament, I am proud to be the first female Member of Parliament for North East Hampshire, the 658th on the list, and a member of the Women and Equality Select Committee. I support the powerful personal and professional testimony from our committee chair, the Honourable Member for Luton North, who spoke on health inequalities, as did the Honourable Members for Clapham and Brixton Hill, Monmouthshire and Penistone and Stocksbridge. Strides are being made in this House to improve the lives of women and achieve equality. The Voyeurism Offences Act 2019, originally introduced by my honourable friend, the Member for Bath, criminalised upskirting. And it has been heartening to hear such powerful speeches across the House on a wide range of topics. But women must also be protected financially. Right now in the UK, women continue to be economically disadvantaged in the workplace. The median hourly pay for women in the UK is 7.7% less than men, and in Hampshire, the gap almost doubles. The gender pay gap also worsens with age. Among full-time employees aged 40 and over, the gap widens considerably due to the motherhood penalty. This is not a fact we should accept. Women deserve better from their workplaces and from the societal structures that enable this to continue. Policies such as increased paternity leave will help women to have a fair share of wages. Improving policy for women also improves it for men. As the Honourable Member for Kettering has said, equality benefits everyone. Today I speak proudly as a progressive, internationalist, cosmopolitan woman inspired by the strength of women leaders. Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand impressed the world with her management of crises from terrorism to the pandemic, whilst also being the second ever elected world leader to give birth whilst in office. Kamala Harris was the first female, the first black and the first Asian American Vice President of the USA, and Sanna Marin, who became the world's youngest Prime Minister in 2019, guided Finland to become the 31st member of NATO. In the face of sexism in political life, who can forget Julia Gillard's 2012 speech on misogyny, where she powerfully addressed the sexism to which she had been subjected? It is this persistence, resilience and fortitude that women and girls must continue to have in political, public, professional and private spaces across the globe that will ensure we continue moving in the right direction of equality for all women. We're not there yet, but our progress must be celebrated.
I call Shadow Minister Mims Davies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's always a pleasure to close this debate and be part of this debate, especially today on behalf of His Majesty's official opposition. I'm proud to be the Shadow Cabinet member as the Shadow Minister for Women, and again today it's a poignant, proud and challenging and sometimes joyful debate. But once again, it has been always informative. I would like to thank the Honourable Member for Brent East, my fellow co-chair of the All-Party Women in Parliament and the Backbench Business Committee for securing this debate. I thank all members for their contributions, and I'll touch on the remarks as I go. And of course, it is Women's History Month, and I thank Mr Speaker for the event in the House last night where we're able to celebrate women's history. And in fact, particular pleasure to hear from my honourable friend for Spelthorne about Tilly Schilling today in the Chamber. International Women's Day is important in allowing us to take stock, to be realistic, but also to celebrate our progress as women towards equality, but also, as we've heard today, recognise that more can and should be done. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of joining the Nordic Council at the British and Nordic breakfast here in Westminster with their Secretary-General, with Helen Pankhurst, the convener of Centenary Action and the coordinator of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians. We were exchanging views and experiences on women in democracy, civil society and the importance of interparliamentary cooperation and support. And as we've heard, that is vital in the Chamber today. I'm especially pleased to welcome this year's International Women's Day and
the 8th of March, as we mark the half-century since the first woman to be elected a party leader. Also, on this side of this House, of course, on the Conservative benches, going on to be the first head of government in the Western world as a woman. And, of course, I'm talking about Margaret Thatcher. I couldn't help notice a cross. She didn't get much of a mention, so it was up to me to make sure that that was balanced. And in her time in office, more women entered the workforce and were professionals and became trailblazers. In fact, her statute just out there, iron ladies in their fields, just like she. And she really challenged the status quo, allowing all of us to do that. And as women, we stand here on the shoulders of the women who've come here before us. I am the 380th woman elected to Parliament. And I must say to men and women in the chamber, no one ever is here just to make up the numbers. And I say that to the Honourable Lady opposite from Kettering, who works with me on the all-party youth affairs. The power of young people really matters. We agree furiously on that. And it was famously said that we were all the future once, so do not worry. And I'm pleased with her to work on shaping that future. It's young women and young men working together that is vital. And in fact, Baroness Owen of Audley Edge in the other place should be praised for her work as a young woman in Parliament taking on the deep fake porn. I can't even think of words of what I want to say about that. They're just about works anyway. But it's really important that I remind the House, in keeping with our Conservative values, that a meritocracy is not a tick box, it's not a tokenism, that our rise and our success as more Conservative MPs is not about making up the numbers, as I say. And I pay tribute to the Honourable Lady from Penstone and Stockbridge, sharing her experience as a pregnant woman and her disablement and her incredible strength on talking about it, and getting here just shows what a strong voice she is in sharing that. Now, we have had 3 more Conservative women leaders on our sides. Come on, folks, over there. And the subsequent, of course, new leader, just, put yourself forward. Subsequent years, of course, my right honourable friend, we've just seen, because we like leaderships in our party, don't we? We've seen my right honourable friend for North West Essex leading us. I'm extremely proud to sit at the shadow cabinet table with her, as I said. And I'm sorry to say, in the last year, I lost many female MP, dear colleagues, who haven't come back to this place. The voters, I'm afraid, a bit back, but we'll keep pushing on our side of the House. Now, we're going to hear from the Honourable Lady opposite about the cruelly shut down short lives of those who had their lives robbed by femicide. And we will acknowledge the impact to their family and their friends. And I welcome the new government's Minister for Women, Baroness Smith of Malvern, in the other place. And I do want to thank the previous Minister for her sisterhood and kindness to me in her previous shadow role and in government. But it would be remiss of me not to say at this box that I am disappointed the role's not been retained in this side of the House, and perhaps the Honourable Lady opposite would have found time to take it, because I've worked with and seen the Honourable Lady in the last 10 years, working together on the first Women and Equality Select Committee. So there is admiration, I hope, on both sides. And may I quickly turn to some amazing women in my constituency. Reverend Canon Martha Mutikani, the new vicar of Skeins Hill, following Reverend Bev, just in place today. Sabrina Cohen-Hatton, many people would know she's the West Sussex Chief Fire Officer. Katie Bourne, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Sussex. And many people know I have 2 daughters, one of them born on International Women's Day, so it's always a cake versus marching day. This weekend, cake has won. But one of my young daughters is now a degree apprentice in a frontline role, and I know exactly what it means to take on challenges. Catherine Hibbert Little, who I must mention, from the Mugtree in East Grinstead, an amazing women entrepreneur, and above all, she's making the birthday cake, so she is wonderful. And Helen Tomlinson, a wonderful lady, I must mention at the box, the cross-government menopause champion, proud of her work around No Time to Step Back, and my time in government, working with the Honourable Lady opposite, the work that we've done on women's employment, progression, safety, spiking, standing up for women and standing up for menopausal women. It is something we roundly share in this House. I would also like to mention, as March is Brain Tumour Awareness Month, my friend and constituent Holly Vivian. She's a young mum, she's a nurse, and she is living with brain tumour. And it's Wear a Hat Day soon. Please do that for her, raising awareness and fundraising. I just want to turn, if I may, to the accelerating action on women and girls. The fundamental right is to be safe from violence. And I remind the House that criminality in the home is something called domestic violence. That is criminality front and centre. We should never accept it, and we should always remind women or anybody suffering from domestic violence that there is a safe place for you, and we as MPs and in the community be there for you. I also want to remind the House what I brought forward to the box previously around my concern, along with Women's Aid, about the early release scheme. I'm sure the Honourable Lady opposite and the front bench will be continuing to look at the safety of women because of that. And I hope Equalities Ministers will work with Justice colleagues and Home Office colleagues to ensure that dangerous criminals for offences relating to sexual or sex-based violence are not amongst those getting the chance to leave prison early. We know just last week, Maidstone Crown Court, it was reported a prisoner from that scheme groped a woman within 15 minutes of being released. And I hope the Minister can assure this House on this issue. On safety, I want to reiterate the calls from my party around the time-limited independent inquiry on grooming gangs. I want to thank all members of this House who stood up on this matter, particularly the Honourable friend from Keighley and Ilkley, as well as the Honourable Member for Rotherham, who, like many others, have continued to work on this. I do believe we can and should go further to make sure victims are adequately heard. We continue to protect women and girls from these appalling crimes. The Wales-wide grooming gang, the victims have asked for this, and I really hope the government, particularly on this day, will listen. The Honourable Lady from Knowsley talked about mothers murdered by sons. As I said, domestic violence is criminality in the home, and I found that particularly stark part of this afternoon's proceedings. The Honourable Lady from Brent talked today about the challenge of erosing women and that we've come too far to go backwards. I know that she won't let that happen. We don't always agree on everything, but on that we can definitely agree. My honourable friend from Gordon and Buchan spoke about her gale force mum, an incredible woman, and also Olympians and amazing farmers in her constituency. Also, thank the chairman of the Select Committee talking about her work and also highlighting FGM, which I think in particular is something extremely pertinent. If I may close, I find my final note. So many notes in here because Madam Deputy Speaker is going to drag me out otherwise. Madeleine Albright said, "It took me quite a long time to develop a voice, and I have it. Now that I have it, I'm not going to be silent." In the theme of accelerating action now, it's time to hear. Member of Parliament stands for most persistent, and we all have to do what we can, together with men and boys, to deliver true equality, safety and fairness for all. Today, International Women's Day and beyond. Thank you.
Minister, Jess Phillips. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to both all the Madam Deputy Speakers who have sat through this debate. I want to start by thanking the member for Brent East for bringing this debate. She said in her comment that she was the 286th Member of Parliament, is that right? 286th female Member of Parliament elected to this House, and 10 years after she was first elected, I was elected, and I'm the 311th, and so there was actually only 25 in between the two of us, and yet there are women who stood in this chamber today who said they were the 689th. So in the following 10 years, the acceleration of that pace is what International Women's Day is all about this year, about accelerating action. So let's keep that up. International Women's Day is a moment to celebrate the achievements of women here in the UK and to recognise the enormous contribution they have made across every sector, and many have done that in the House today. It has really shone through in the debate and has been a privilege to listen as members have reflected on the women who have influenced and inspired them. But it turns to me to do the thing I do every year. And I wish I could be entirely uplifting. While we celebrate women who have lit up our lives and helped change the world, we also lament the loss of those who did not have the chance. The statistics show that a woman is killed by a man on average every 3 days in the UK, and that 1 in 5 homicides are domestic homicides. We cannot allow this to continue. We must act now and be relentless in chasing the change. Many have mentioned today Reneem's law that the government have brought in to embed specialists in 999 control rooms. And I hope that this shows how important this list, the issue of women killed, is to this government, how it drives our actions, because I read out the names of Reneem, Uda and Kaula Salim, her mother, on the years that they were killed. We have also set about putting in place the new domestic abuse protection orders, which is a huge step forward and has already seen where perpetrators breach their orders, that they are being arrested swiftly and incarcerated, and that entirely comes from every domestic homicide review that I have read that tells me when a perpetrator breaches an order, if we don't respond, the consequences can be fatal. The government is also seeking to push forward massively on stalking laws, and there are many who I have read on the list over the years who have died because we didn't take stalking too seriously. One of the things the government will do is allow people to know the identity of their online stalkers. Which currently isn't the case and is based on the case of Nicola Thorpe. I'm going to call it Nicola's Law because I want to start having laws for women who didn't die. Women who didn't have to die so that we changed the law is what we have to get to. We must go further and push harder. Unfortunately, it's too late to protect those already taken from us. To ensure that we do not forget them and all the women who have suffered due to violence against women and girls, and I say this is men's violence against women and girls, I will take this opportunity to read the names collated by the amazing women at the Femicide Census. They collate the list of women and girls aged 14 and above, and this year 4 children are included on the list who have allegedly been killed by, or known to have been killed by men in the past year. This is the 10th year I have read this list. I do it now for the first time from the dispatch box of the House of Commons. I do it in front of and to honour the families of these women and the women who have appeared on the list in the past. Last year, I said that I felt tired and angry and weary. I was sick of the failures. But as I stand here today, on the front bench, placed here by a Prime Minister inspired to action who mentioned the reading of the list in the very first ever speech he made from this dispatch box as the Prime Minister, alongside a Home Secretary and a flight of brilliant ministers who are totally dedicated to this. I feel hopeful that the women whose names I'm about to read out, they left us breadcrumbs. They left us clues as to why they died. And we cannot stand and say any more that lessons will be learned. What I promise is that I will actually learn the lessons. Here is the list this year. Zay Wang, Pauline Sweeney, Carol Matthews, Ursula Allman, Tiffany Render, Frances Dwyer, Ruth Baker, Kennedy Westcar Sabarosh, Samantha Mickelber, Rachel McDade, Lisa Welford, Karen O'Leary, Sonia Parker, Tanjit Riaz, Anita McKay, Bajan Kaur, Catherine Parton, Emma Finch, Margaret Parker, Amy Gray, Maria Nugara, Patsy Oust, Veronica Chinyanga, Delia Hacksworth, Joanna Ward, Lauren Evans, Maxine Clark, Scarlett Vickers, Sophie Evans, Joanne Samak, Carol Hunt, Louise Hunt, Hannah Hunt, Jenny Sharp, Alana Odysseus, Laura Robson, Kulsuma Akhtar, Rebecca Simkin, Olivia Wood, Courtney Mitchell, Nina Denisova, Alberta Obinham, Stephanie Marie, Sophie Watson, Vicky Thomas, Eve McIntyre, Montserrat Martorell, Cher Maximum, Brodie McGregor, Zanil Zabanda, Bryony Gawaith and her children Oscar Birtle and Aubrey Birtle, Davinia Graham, Barbara Nomakosa, Christine Everett Hickson, Juliana Prosper and her children Giselle and Carl Prosper, Rachel Simpson, Mary Ward, Luca Bennett Smith, Anita Rose, Mashal Ilias, Rhiannon Sly White, Catherine Flynn, Sadie Butler, Rita Felming, Cheryl McKenna, Carol James, Phoenix Spencer Horn, Harshita Brella, Alana Armstrong, Margaret Cunningham, Christine Spirain, Margaret Hanson, Karen Cummings, Astra Sirapina, Miriam Barosh, Gemma Devonish, Joanne Pearson, Tihona Grant, Heather Newton, June Henty, Layla Young, Julie Buckley, Jamaluta Tuswana, Diane Cleary, Claire Chick, Margaret Werby, Carmen Coulson, Rita Lambourne, Megan Hughes, Lisa Smith, Anne-Maria Muraru, Leanne Williams, 2 women from Birmingham whose names have not yet been confirmed. Finally, though the suspects have not been identified, I would like to honour the lives of Dora Leese and Christine Jeffreys. Also, in the last year, Sharon Holland, Chloe Holland's mother, has asked, because her name would never have been read out on this list, if she would be remembered. So I ask that we remember Chloe and we remember alongside her the list of women who died from suicide or unclear, sinister and hidden circumstances where we know there was a history of domestic abuse or sexual violence. Those women's names will not make it onto this list because nobody has ever been held accountable for their deaths. I promise today that we are working on these hidden homicides. They deserve better. They deserve justice. I will finish by thanking everyone who has contributed to the debate. I note that this year's debate, the amount of people who talked about the women who had been harmed in their constituency and the calls for action for change has been incredibly heartening. We have heard about making work pay, keeping our streets safe, and women who have fought tirelessly to embed true equality into our everyday lives. This is a fight that demands the very best from all of us, and we must rise to the occasion. Under this issue, under this government, this issue will get the attention that it deserves. We will keep honouring and celebrating women as we build a society in which they are respected and protected. And we will back up our words with action as we seek real and lasting change, undeterred by those who sit on the sidelines while the list of names grows longer. Thank you.
Dawn Butler to wind up.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for doing what she does in reading out those names. This is a very difficult debate to have had today, and I feel more emotional than normal, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I fear that things are going to get worse. I fear that that list is going to get longer because we are at that tipping point. And if we don't stop what's going on globally around the world, if we don't call it out, it will get worse. But I must say to everybody who contributed in this debate today, thank you. It's been a powerful debate. It's been wonderful for members to have an excuse to talk about the brilliant women in their constituency. It's been great to hear about them. I'd love to meet all of them. And for all the women who talked about their own lived experience, from being pregnant and how you were treated as a disabled woman, being the youngest woman in Parliament and how you're treated, being raped and how you've come through that. You know, the lived experience, I hope that everybody outside of this chamber hears their stories today. Thank you.
And we should never need an excuse. The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The front benchers wanted to take a few moments to swap over. Yeah.